Chapter 872. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua deflect the tip of the flexible sword, Master Ming was surprised, but he did not panic. He lowered his body and pulled back his right hand, which was holding the sword. He spun the flexible sword in a circle, and like the Tenryu sect's Qin Shiryu, he slashed it diagonally towards Zhang Xiaohua's head. Zhang Xiaohua shouted and raised his heavy sword again, smashing it towards the middle of the flexible sword. This move was invincible just now, and all the disciples regretted it after being smashed by Zhang Xiaohua. However, martial Uncle Ming did not dodge and continued to slash at Zhang Xiaohua with his flexible sword. Just as the two swords were about to collide, he flicked his wrist and used the back of his sword to strike Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword. The tip of the flexible sword curved like a venomous snake coming out of its hole and pecked at Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. This flexible sword was the nemesis of Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword. Zhang Xiaohua had seen Peacock use the flexible sword when she was on the way to Chuanxiang cult. She had a good understanding of the weapon's characteristics, and Master Ming's move was within her expectations. Zhang Xiaohua raised her left hand and curled her middle finger, aiming at the tip of the sword. Pang! A huge force was transmitted to Master Ming's hand, and he was surprised. Is this internal energy? Or is it pure strength? The tip of the flexible sword was deflected by Zhang Xiaohua, and Zhang Xiaohua raised her left leg and kicked Master Ming's waist. Master Ming's lips curled into a smile and his left hand turned into a claw. Like an eagle's beak, he clawed at Zhang Xiaohua's ankle. This was the famous eagle claw technique. Although Zhang Xiaohua had tempered her bones with the fist of the North Star, she was not interested in using her own leg to test Master Ming's skill. She bent her leg and dodged the eagle's claw. Following that, she kicked out again. Master Ming calmly changed his claw into a fist and collided with Zhang Xiaohua's leg. With a muffled sound, Master Ming lost his balance and staggered a few steps back. His flexible sword was also deflected by Zhang Xiaohua's attack. See, martial Uncle Ming finally put away the remaining contempt in his heart and treated this alchemy disciple from the distant fire hall as a true opponent. He really couldn't understand how a disciple from the distant fire palace could have such high martial arts. Moreover, the strength in his hands was simply unimaginable. If he hadn't used his internal energy and used all his strength to fight back, wouldn't he have been defeated in those few moves? At this moment, it was urgent and Master Ming did not have time to think carefully. He roused his spirit and used all that he had learned in his life. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua, he also had a dignified expression. This Master Ming's martial arts were indeed high and his inner energy was unparalleled. Especially his flexible sword moves, they often overturned common sense and attacked from unimaginable angles, causing Zhang Xiaohua to be in an extremely difficult situation. If it was a life-and-death battle, perhaps if there was no one around, Zhang Xiaohua would have already used the Immortal Dao's magical powers to restrain him. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua only wanted to barge into Yixiang Peak and not to massacre Yixiang Peak. Hence, she could only use her heavy sword and sword techniques to fight. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Zhang Xiaohua was already in a bit of a pinch. Her back and shoulders had already been stabbed several times by the flexible sword. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua had the long robe to protect her body. Ignoring the Immortal Dao's attacks, this simple martial arts attack was more than enough to deal with. When Master Ming saw that his flexible sword was ineffective, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua had practiced the body tempering technique. He was puzzled and looked for her weak point. Seeing that she was stabbed by the flexible sword, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was already impatient. She unconsciously released her spiritual sense and used her thumb and index finger to grab the tip of the flexible sword. It was as if a snake's weak point was grabbed. No matter how much strength Master Ming used, he could not pull the flexible sword out even half an inch. Master Ming was a little depressed. He forcefully channeled his inner energy and wanted to straighten the flexible sword. However, when his inner energy reached the tip of the sword, it was blocked. The entire flexible sword could not be straightened no matter what. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had a mischievous smile on her face and was about to exert more strength with her 2 fingers, Master Ming knew that things were not going well. His flexible sword was not an ordinary long sword. It was personally bestowed by the palace master of Ruijin Hall. It was a high-quality item found in the Heaven and Earth Hall's heavenly pavilion. If it was easily broken by Zhang Xiaohua, not to mention how to deal with Zhang Xiaohua, even he himself would not be able to answer to the palace master. Wait! Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to use the same trick again, Master Ming shouted, "Junior brother Ren, please wait." Zhang Xiaohua frowned and did not loosen her grip. She asked, "Senior brother, do you have any instructions? This round is considered your win." "Junior brother Ren, I concede defeat. Just let go." Master Ming was extremely helpless. The feeling of not being able to take action for fear of breaking the vases was really uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned at first, but she immediately understood. She smiled and said, "Senior brother's martial arts are strong. Ren wants to learn from you. Wait until I break the tip of this flexible sword, then I will fight with you for 300 rounds. Wait. Master Ming knew that Zhang Xiaohua was merciless. Otherwise, she would not have broken the swords of all the disciples. Hence, he hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Ren, your martial arts are strong. I am really not your opponent. You should let go of my flexible sword." He. Zhang Xiaohua laughed evilly, "I can let go of it. However, is there any benefit in doing so?" Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have tasted the sweetness of a deal behind the scenes. She laughed. "You." Master Ming almost fainted. His martial arts were obviously higher than Yi Lingchen's and his swordsmanship was also exquisite. However, he was not strong enough and was caught off guard. It was fine if he let Yi Lingchen go, but Yi Lingchen actually wanted to raise some conditions. Master Ming gritted his teeth and said, "Junior brother Ren, don't push me too far. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered." Zhang Xiaohua's right hand twirled the 10,000 jin sword like it was a piece of straw. She only smiled and said, "This sword of mine is used to kill rabbits that love to eat the grass around their nest." "What the? I'm not the one eating the grass around your nest." Master Ming felt a headache coming on. This was obviously a case of jealousy. Although the difference in status between the two of them was too great, and one of them was his senior brother, but he was just an innocent bystander. "Even if your city gate is on fire, don't implicate me, alright? You. What do you want to say? I'll listen here first. If you want to force me, then don't blame me for abandoning this flexible sword and fighting you to the end." Master Ming said righteously. Well said, well said." Zhang Xiaohua squinted her eyes and looked behind Master Ming for a long time. She then smiled and said, "Actually, Ren's suggestion is for everyone's good. I know that you have your duty and have no choice but to stop me. However, I must break through the mountain today. So, you just stand aside and let me go up the mountain." "Go," Master Ming said angrily, "if we let you go up, do we still have any face? You have the nerve to say such words. Forget it. You still broke my flexible sword. Even if I have to risk the scolding of the palace master, I will use the power of the entire palace to stop you." "Who's afraid of who?" Zhang Xiaohua said disdainfully, "I'm just afraid of hurting the innocent. I'll break the weapons of your Ruijin Palace's disciples and make things difficult for Qiankun Hall." Seeing that they couldn't come to an agreement, the two of them frowned at the same time. Master Ming's eyes turned quickly. He was at a disadvantage at this time. Zhang Xiaohua was barefooted and wasn't afraid of wearing shoes. She was also breaking through the mountain. How about this? Master Ming thought for a while and said, "Junior brother Ren's martial arts are outstanding. To be honest, the ordinary disciples of Ruijin Palace are definitely not your opponent. If you force them to fight, it'll just be a joke. Our Ruijin Palace also wants face. In order to respect you, a rare opponent, we won't have the idea of winning with numbers. That's great. Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to clap her hands. Junior brother Ren is very brave. He has already broken through the deep earth palace from the distant fire palace at the foot of the mountain. He is now in the territory of the Greenwood Palace. Behind him are the Soft Water Palace, Ruijin Palace, and Mo Xian Palace. If you win, I will send you through the restriction of the Greenwood Palace. Then, my Ruijin Palace's disciples will no longer obstruct you along the way. We will only send our elite disciples to the restriction of the Soft Water Palace, Ruijin Palace, and Mo Xian Palace. If you win, you will pass. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. Are you serious? Master Ming proudly said, I am on duty today. Naturally, I have the final say. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua loosened her hand and said with a smile, I'll believe you this time. Master Ming put away his flexible sword and said, however, I still have a condition. Zhang Xiaohua's face changed and said angrily, I believe you. You dare to trick me? Where? Uncle Master Ming explained, junior apprentice brother Ren is very brave. You managed to rush halfway up the mountain in such a short period of time. I was a little careless. If you challenge the formation, you have to sit on the bench for a while. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said with a smile, Ren originally thought that he had taken advantage of me. But now, it seems that he was schemed against by senior brother Ming. A gentleman keeps his word. I'll do as you say. This time, Zhang Xiaohua had fallen into martial Uncle Ming's trap. With Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts, if she didn't reveal her ethereal steps and only used ordinary qing gong, it wouldn't take her much time to reach Mo Xian Palace. Although she encountered many ordinary disciples of Ruijin Hall, they were just ants. How could they shake Zhang Xiaohua's wheels? It was just a matter of wasting more effort and making people draw more circles. The elites of Ruijin Palace, those whose martial arts were on par with martial Uncle Ming or even more powerful than martial Uncle Ming, might not be able to make it in time because they were not on duty. With martial Uncle Ming's arrangement, Zhang Xiaohua only needed to pass through 3 checkpoints to reach Mo Xian Palace. However, he would have to spend a lot of time. Ruijin Palace could also calmly make arrangements and bring out powerful opponents. They used 3 disciples with great martial arts to replace hundreds of ants. Who was more important and who was more important? Everyone could see it clearly. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua's experience in the pugilistic world was still shallow. She only wanted to relax, but she fell into a trap. Calm, there are more chapters. Chapter 873. On Lingering Fragrance Peak, in the Heritage Palace, there was no sign of anyone outside the Heritage Chamber. Nun Jing-yi was not waiting here. Inside the Heritage Chamber, Peacock, Chen Chen, and Swift were no longer in the study. Beside the study, behind the wall that emitted a faint white glow was a large space. In this space, the mountain walls in all directions were inlaid with luminous pearls, like stars in the sky, illuminating the space. Under the starry sky, Peacock, Chen Chen, and Swift each sat cross-legged in a position with their palms facing the sky and their eyes closed in silence. Everything looked tranquil. However, under the light of the night pearl, the seemingly dark mountain wall was inlaid with many stones of different colors and sizes. Although these stones of different colors covered the entire mountain wall, they were extremely neat. The stones of different colors might be of the same color together, or they might be of different colors. However, if one were to take a closer look, they would not be able to see anything. Although these stones did not emit a dazzling brilliance and were covered by the luminous pearls, after looking at them for a long time, one would naturally know that these stones were the rulers of this starry sky. Peacock closed her eyes as she sat below a fiery red rock. Her face was slightly impatient. She was following the instructions in the introductory chant of the Art of Developing Ice, to adjust her breathing. She opened all the pores on her body and tried again and again to feel the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the secret chamber. Unfortunately, it was already the 13th day and there was still no effect. The yuan qi of heaven and earth mentioned in the mental cultivation method was not only not absorbed into her body, she could not even feel it. Could it be that I'm not fated to be an immortal? Peacock was not anxious. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at Chen Chen and Swift, who were sitting not far in front of her. The three of them had already chosen the cultivation method they wanted to cultivate on the very first day they entered the secret chamber. The thin booklet only recorded the introductory chant, which was not difficult for these talented people. Although the chant was obscure and the method was unimaginable, they were able to comprehend it in just one day. After Peacock crossed the glowing white wall, Chen Chen and Swift followed suit. Peacock heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Chen Chen and Swift were frowning as well. It looks like I'm not the only one who doesn't understand and can't sense any worldly energy. Even my two junior sisters aren't making any progress. The cultivation of the path of immortality is truly unimaginable. It actually absorbs primordial qi from heaven and earth to temper one's meridians. Compared to the path of martial arts, which uses one's own hard work to generate internal energy, this is 100 times stronger. Yes, it should be 10,000 times stronger. No matter how tough a person's meridians are, there is always a limit to the amount of internal energy they can generate. However, there is an infinite amount of elemental energy in the world. Immortal Tao techniques can be absorbed from the outside world like drinking water. Of course, martial arts can't compare. Moreover, immortal Tao cultivation techniques can mobilize heaven and earth yuan qi to be used for attack and defense. They are extremely powerful, and it is even possible to move mountains and drain seas. It is truly not something that martial Tao can compare to. However, it is precisely because immortal Tao relies on external forces and is heavily dependent on the external environment. If there is a great change in heaven and earth yuan qi, just like what Master said, the heaven and earth yuan qi can no longer be used since 10,000 years ago. It is so thin that it can no longer be absorbed. This directly led to the destruction of immortal Tao. But the path of immortality has been destroyed for 10,000 years. How can incense sect pass down the path of immortality? How can we sense the heaven and earth yuan qi in this secret room and even absorb the first strand of heaven and earth yuan qi into our bodies? With this thought in mind, Peacock turned her gaze to the colorful stones on the stone wall above her. This is the so-called primordial stone. I remember when I entered the Valley of Dusk a few years ago, Master gave me a piece and told me to use it carefully. When I returned from the Valley of Dusk, he took it back. Peacock instantly understood. The primordial stone embedded on the stone wall above her head was the key to passing down the legacy of Incense Sect. There must be something fishy about the way these primordial stones were embedded. Formation. These two words inadvertently flashed across Peacock's mind. That's right, it is a formation. Isn't the illusion formation in the refining heart cave an array? Even though I can't see how the array was set up, the refining heart cave must have been set up with primordial stones. But what kind of formation was set up with so many primordial stones? Peacock was perplexed. What kind of magical formation could allow someone who has never sensed the heaven and earth yuan qi to absorb the first strand of heaven and earth yuan qi from this secret room? It should be when the heaven and earth yuan qi is thin. It allows the disciples of lingering fragrance peak to absorb the heaven and earth yuan qi through normal means, just like when immortal Tao flourished. With this thought, Peacock frowned. She seemed to recall her master talking to her about this before. But it was so long ago, how could she remember clearly? Sigh, it seems like I still don't have the aptitude to cultivate immortal Tao techniques. Peacock sighed. Even at such a crucial moment, I can't believe I'm still thinking about such boring things. As she sighed, Peacock was about to look away when suddenly she seemed to have noticed something. Her eyes widened. There are so many primordial stones on this stone wall. It feels like there are many colors. But if I look closely, there should be 6 colors. Oh, no, it should be 5 colors. With this thought, Peacock was enlightened. 5 elements spirit gathering formation. Yes, it's the 5 elements spirit gathering formation. Master mentioned before that using the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth yuan qi can be set up into a magical formation. It gathers the heaven and earth yuan qi in the formation, causing the heaven and earth yuan qi to be several times thicker than the outside. That must be it. Now that the heaven and earth yuan qi is so thin, only the 5 elements spirit gathering formation can gather the thin heaven and earth yuan qi together. It's almost as thick as when immortal Tao was at its peak. Only this way can disciples like us who have no foundation in immortal Tao be able to sense the heaven and earth yuan qi. After that, Peacock understood everything. The 5 elements spirit gathering formation is set up with primordial stones of 5 different elements. Under the primordial stones of different elements, the concentration of heaven and earth yuan qi of different elements must be different. Ice developing technique, although I don't know how it's recorded in the back, but from the name, it's a water-type technique. Peacock looked up and saw the fiery red primordial stones above her. She smiled bitterly. The fiery red primordial stones are probably of the fire attribute. I'm practicing water-type techniques under these fire attribute primordial stones, how can I succeed? She then looked up and saw that there was a light blue primordial stone opposite her. Chen Chen was sitting under it. Peacock knew what kind of technique Chen Chen and Yu Yan were using. It was the blazing heart technique. Needless to say, just based on the word flame, it should be a fire-based technique. Chen Chen was also sitting under the water primordial stone. How could he succeed? She then looked at Swift. She chose star slashing technique. If she was not wrong, it should be a metal attribute technique. Above Swift's head, there were a few different types of primordial stones, but there was no gold primordial stone. No wonder. Peacock was enlightened, but then she was puzzled. The leader must know about this. Why didn't she remind us before we entered the secret room? Could it be that there's something? Peacock did not want to think any further. After all, the leader always had a reason for everything she did. There was no reason for her to explain it to her. More importantly, the time was almost up. If she could not sense the heaven and earth yuan qi in a few more days and could not absorb it into her body, then the inheritance would be a failure. Peacock did not hesitate to get up. The moment she got up, Chen Chen and Swift opened their eyes. Chen Chen was shocked. "Senior, you've entered the sect so quickly." Swift did not speak, but her eyes were filled with envy. Peacock said impatiently, "It's not that fast." Then she walked in front of Chen Chen and said, "I'll sit here, you go sit beside me." Chen Chen had always listened to Peacock since he was young. Without hesitation, he got up. Peacock and Chen Chen switched places and both of them closed their eyes. Swift saw this and her eyes were filled with confusion. She stared at the two of them for a while before she closed her eyes. At this time, Peacock smiled and said, "Swift, go sit over there." As he spoke, he pointed at a spot below a golden origin stone. Swift was stunned and did not know what to do. She looked at Peacock who had closed her eyes expressionlessly. Swift saw that Chen Chen also had his eyes closed and her heart skipped a beat. She was different from Peacock and Chen Chen. Priestess Xue was also different from Priestess Jing Fan. Therefore, she knew much less about the sect's secrets. Since the two of them had switched places, they must have discovered something. It would be fine if they did not tell her, but since they did, it must be beneficial to her. She had been sitting here for more than 10 days and had not made any progress. Perhaps Peacock was right. Swift was an intelligent person. To be able to stand out in the selection, how could she be a simple person? Once she understood, she immediately got up and moved to the spot below the gold primordial stone. The three of them started again. In Mo Xian's palace, Priestess Jing Yi took out a scroll and read it carefully. As she was reading, she sighed for no reason and put the scroll on the table. She floated up and walked slowly to the palace gate. She looked up at the sun that was close to noon and sighed. It's already the 17th day. If he doesn't come out tomorrow, this inheritance will be considered a failure. The selection is already so difficult, the inheritance of the incense sect. It's hard to say what will happen in the future. At this time, she heard footsteps in the distance. Could it be that someone has come out? Priestess Jing Yi looked up and her face was immediately filled with disappointment. The person who came was none other than the head of Ruijin Palace, Great Elder Jing Gang. Seeing Great Elder Jing Gang's happy face, Priestess Jing Yi was puzzled. She went up and smiled. Great Senior Sister, is there any good news? Priestess Jing Gang did not neglect her. She first saluted and then said, Great Leader, what do you think of the matter I told you before? Chapter 874. Hearing Nun Jing Gang's question, Nun Jing Yi was taken aback and asked in bewilderment, what is eldest senior sister talking about? Ha, it's about Mu Jun and Zixia. Nun Jing Gang wasn't displeased at all and only smiled apologetically. You also know that my eldest disciple has always had very high standards and has never placed ordinary women in his eyes. He's already so old, yet he's still alone. But this Zixia is his fate. Ever since he met her by chance, he couldn't forget her no matter what. After I told Sir Cult Master last time, I also told him to wait a little longer and listen to Sir Cult Master's arrangements, but... Nun Jing Yi slapped her forehead and said very apologetically, Io, eldest senior sister, look at me, I'm really sorry. I've been busy with the direct selection and inheritance these days. Nun Jing Gang smiled. I know that Sir Cult Master has many matters to attend to and is also the key to the direct selection and inheritance, but this child Mu Jun has waited for so long, and is too embarrassed to come himself, so he urged me to come and ask Sir Cult Master. Ha, it's very normal for men and women to love each other. Nun Jing Yi said with a smile. However, immediately after, there was some difficulty on her face and she said, I understand Mu Jun's thoughts. When eldest senior sister mentioned it to me, I immediately asked Zixia about it. But this girl's character is extremely stubborn, and junior sister Jing Xian isn't here, so I can only ask for her own opinion. She doesn't seem to be interested in Mu Jun, so I can't make things too difficult for her. However, I saw that she wasn't in a good mood those days, so perhaps she didn't consider this matter too much. It just so happened that the Yulon Valley was refined, so I agreed to let her go with that girl Chen Chen to the Yulon Valley. Who knew that they would encounter the yellow wind wreaking havoc? It was really dangerous. I reckon that after going through the test of life and death, Zixia will have a new understanding of life, and perhaps it can change some of her ideas. Nun Jing Gang was overjoyed and said with a smile, I was wondering why Sir Cult Master didn't mention it again. It turns out that you've made so many arrangements. Perhaps Sir Cult Master's arrangements have taken effect, that girl Zixia has relented. Mu Jun is wild with joy and has asked me to ask Sir Cult Master, What? Nun Jing Yi also smiled and said, your family's Mu Jun is really something, to actually be able to make Zixia relent. This sect still congratulates eldest senior sister in advance. It's nothing. Abbess Jing Gang was also happy. Unfortunately, Nun Jing Yi added, but eldest senior sister, you know the rules of the incense order. The purple cloud beard is voluntary. If you force her, don't blame me, how could that be? Nun Jing Gang smiled and said, I'm the great elder of our fragrant cult. I still remember these rules. That's good. Nun Jing Yi nodded. If you have time, you should teach Yu Zhuqiuan a lesson. He's too much. Jing Gang said with an embarrassed expression, of course. When Zhuqiuan returns, I will immediately inform him of Lord Hierarch's intentions. Come back. Where did he go? Nun Jing Yi was stunned. I don't think I sent him out. Nun Jinggang became even more embarrassed. This brat disappeared the last time he came back from outside. I don't know where he went either, Nun Jingyi sneered. You better find him properly. If anything happens, I won't be lenient. Of course, of course. Nun Jinggang almost wanted to wipe away the sweat on her forehead. However, Nun Jingyi smiled. Let's go. Let's go see Zixia and see what she's thinking. Inside Mo Xian's palace, in a secluded courtyard, in a seemingly simple living room, Meng Zheng had her head lowered. Her eyes were looking at the floor that seemed to be made of limestone, but was actually made of green jade. She was lost in thought, her expression a little worried. Even the slender fingers that were exposed outside of her palace robes were motionless. Although the person in the dream was not extremely beautiful, her eyes, her face, and her somewhat elegant, somewhat sorrowful, somewhat resentful, and somewhat noble temperament all made her an unforgettable beauty. Of course, this beauty wasn't the usual kind of beauty, so not everyone could appreciate it. However, as long as one could see the meaning behind it, they would be intoxicated. Shi Mujuan, who was sitting on the other side of the room, was supposed to be sitting upright and looking straight ahead. However, he couldn't help but look sideways at Meng Zheng's neck, beautiful hair, and slightly furrowed brows. Then, he realized that he had lost his composure and hurriedly retracted his gaze. However, after a while, he couldn't help but turn his head again. Where was the arrogant attitude that he usually had in Rui Jin Palace? After a while, Shi Mujuan couldn't help but whisper, Junior sister Zixia, you have to tell me the truth, right? As soon as I received your message, I immediately rushed over. You also know that when I first saw Junior Marshall's sister Zixia, I was stunned by her beauty and thought that she was a marriage arranged by the heavens. That's why I've been pestering Master in order to tie the knot with her. Junior sister Zixia might not know about the hardships I've gone through during this period of time, but it's only now that I know what it means to be unable to sleep or eat well. When I open my eyes, I see Junior sister Zixia's smile. When I close my eyes, I see Junior sister Zixia's worried face. How can I let go of this? I asked Master to ask Master for help, but there was no news. Just as I was feeling anxious and heartbroken, perhaps the heavens were moved by my infatuation, I actually received a message from Junior sister Zixia. It's really so emotional that I can't express it with words. This is the precious purple phoenix hairpin that Master bestowed upon me in the early years. It's a famous item in our immortal Tao sect. It's my keepsake, please accept it. When Meng heard this, her face became even paler. The fingers on her right hand kept rubbing the ring on her left hand's ring finger. She gritted her teeth, not knowing how to open her mouth. Seeing that Meng was a little nervous, Shi Mujuan smiled. Junior sister Zixia, I know that Junior sister Zixia doesn't have anyone to rely on lingering fragrance peak. Now, other than you, the Shirtai has a registered disciple that I've never met before. If Junior sister Zixia has anything to say today, please tell me. No matter what it is, as long as it's within my power, I'll agree. Meng raised her head slightly and glanced at him with her beautiful eyes. She said indifferently, no matter what it is. Senior brother Shi's tone is a little too arrogant. Shi Mujuan smiled. Junior sister Zixia's request is my lifelong wish. I'll work my heart out and I'll definitely achieve Junior sister Zixia's wish. Then, he hesitated slightly. I won't hide it from Junior sister Zixia. Perhaps I'm sometimes lacking in power, but I still have Master and Master. As long as Junior sister Zixia speaks, there's nothing that can stop me, Master. When Meng heard this, she immediately understood. Her face was slightly angry. Senior Marshal brother Shi, little sister called you over to talk to you in advance. I wanted to listen to what you had to say. How did you alarm Jinggang Shirtai? And Master too? You're obviously forcing me, aren't you? Shi Mujuan panicked. He immediately stood up and bowed to the ground. Junior sister Zixia, you've misunderstood me. Meng said coldly, what's there to misunderstand? I only asked you to come over and talk. You've already taken the token and even Master has been alerted. What else is there to talk about? Shi Mujuan shook his head. I brought the token over to express my confidence. I've also asked the Lord Temple Master and Master to come over to express my determination. I'll definitely agree to any conditions that Junior Sister Zixia raises. Even if I can't agree at that time, the Lord Temple Master and Master are my witnesses. I swear that I'll fulfill them. Meng was disappointed. She waved her hand and said, Senior Brother Shi, please take a seat. She then looked at the sky outside and let out a long sigh. Actually, I won't hide it from Senior Brother Shi. I already have someone else in my heart. Shi Mujuan had just sat down. When he heard this, he immediately stood up and said in surprise, What? Then. Junior Sister Zixia. Meng smiled miserably. It actually made Shi Mujuan's heart ache. He felt as if a sharp knife was gently cutting his heart. He heard the dream say, originally, I didn't consider Senior Martial Brother Shi. Although Lord Sect Leader asked me earlier, but Meng seemed to be unable to continue. Shi Mujuan smiled and said, It's all right, Junior Sister Zixia. Since we've already talked about it, there's nothing to hide. I'm very curious. Which disciple on Lingering Fragrance Peak can actually catch Junior Sister Zixia's eye? Even I can't compare. Then, his expression suddenly changed. Could it be my third junior brother? I haven't seen him for a long time. Could it be that he's avoiding me? Pfft, Meng laughed. Everything paled in comparison. Shi Mujuan was stunned. Senior Brother Shi, you're so imaginative. Meng smiled and said, I have seen your junior brother twice, and he seems to have never put me in his eyes. Senior Brother Shi is praising me too much, and only Senior Brother Shi would take a fancy to someone like me who has the appearance of a willow tree. Shi Mujuan smiled. That's because they have no taste. How could they understand Junior Sister Zixia's beauty? Meng was unhappy when she heard this. She said faintly, Beauty is but a stinky skin. After the mortal world, it'll turn into dust. Shi Mujuan did not reply. After a while, he probed, Junior Sister Zixia, who is the one who made Junior Sister Zixia more depressed than me? Meng shook her head. You don't know him. He is just an ordinary person. Even if he was placed in front of you, you wouldn't look him in the eye, an ordinary person. Shi Mujuan smiled. I was wondering. So it's an old acquaintance from before you came to spread the incense order. Then I won't be jealous anymore. I didn't get to participate in Junior Sister Zixia's previous life. In the future, Junior Sister Zixia will have my shadow around you. Shi Mujuan's words were rather frivolous. He was revealing his true feelings. Unfortunately, Meng did not seem to hear him. She mumbled, Yes, it's an old acquaintance, an old memory that's engraved in my heart. You know it's impossible. Why did you let me meet him? Meng's expression clearly indicated that she was thinking about someone. Shi Mujuan's heart was filled with jealousy. The fire in his heart rose high, but he continued to smile. Junior sister, memories can only be memories. As living people, we have to face life. We have to look forward to everything. Chapter 875. That's right, that's right. Living in this world, we have to look forward to everything, but how can there be such a thing as you wish? Is it something you can forget just because you want to? Her words were melancholy, but Shi Mujuan's heart was moved. Meng's frown revealed that kind of aura without reservation, and Shi Mujuan really had no way to resist it. Shi Mujuan's heart ached for no reason, and he almost stood up. He said righteously, Junior Sister Zixia's worries are my worries as well. Please tell me honestly, Junior Sister Zixia. Although I don't have the absolute authority of the sect leader, I still have some say in the general affairs of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Meng glanced at him and forced a smile. I also fancy senior brother's position. So, I hope senior brother won't blame me. Of course not. Shimujuan patted his chest and laughed. A man's shoulders are meant to shelter a woman from the wind and rain. If you're really thin and weak, it's better if you don't rely on me. Then, he changed the topic. Junior Marshall's sister has told me about her past without hesitation. If I don't take out the magnanimity of a man, how can I live up to Junior Marshall's sister's image in your heart? Meng smiled when she heard that, revealing the only dimple on her left cheek. It was really beautiful. Since senior apprentice brother she has said so, then little sister won't be courteous. Actually, I presume that senior apprentice brother she already had a plan in mind before coming here. Little sister is in this Lingering Fragrance Peak's Mo Sua Palace. What kind of difficult matter could little sister encounter? Isn't it still the matter of my master, Shirtai? When Shimujuan heard this, he also had a card up his sleeve. He nodded and said, this humble one has known Abbess Jing Xian since young. When I was young, I also received a lot of guidance from her. Her sudden passing has indeed caused this humble one to be extremely sad and indignant. That's right. Master has passed away for a long time, but there's still no clue about the culprit who killed her. As her only disciple, I feel even more guilty. Shimujuan licked his lips and said, the Shirtai incident. I personally investigated it back then, but the culprit was truly cunning. He didn't even leave a single trace behind. It wasn't that I didn't try my best, but, other than Shirtai's normal expression and slightly surprised appearance, I really couldn't find anything. Later on, this matter was handed over to my master. It seems that Lord Sect Leader has personally investigated it as well, but he didn't succeed. Indeed. Meng's eyes seemed to have some tears. Master just left like this without a clear reason. He didn't say anything and didn't leave anything behind. Even if little sister wanted to fight for Master's justice with her life, it wouldn't work. Tell me. Senior brother am I not very competent as a disciple? Shimujuan comforted her, don't think too much, junior sister Zixia. As a disciple, you should avenge your master, but, if you don't have the power, you can't force it. Lord Sect Leader has arranged everything, junior sister, you don't have to worry too much. Senior brother, even though you say that, you should know that master. She seems to have been harmed by someone very close to her. If Lord Sect Leader knows some secrets, shut up, junior sister Zixia. Are you out of your mind? Shimujuan looked outside in a panic and said, Lord Sect Leader has her own arrangements. As disciples, we should just follow and watch. Meng stubbornly raised her head and sneered, Senior Marshal brother this little sister originally thought that you were an unyielding man, so I entrusted my heart to you. I even wanted to entrust my future to you, but this little sister has yet to speak a few words of truth. Could it be that Senior Marshal brother is afraid? This. Shimujuan scratched his head, Junior sister Zixia, you can't say that. Back then, I was also personally involved in the Shirtai incident. However, there was something fishy about it and there were no clues at all. You can't blame Lord Sect Leader for this. Senior brother, you still don't understand little sister's heart. Little sister didn't say that Lord Sect Leader had done this. I just thought that with Lord Sect Leader's wisdom, how could this matter have been dragged on for so many years? If Lord Sect Leader had put her heart into it, wouldn't the truth have come to light long ago? Furthermore, I see that Lord Sect Leader is very busy. I'm afraid that Lord Sect Leader has long forgotten about my master's incident. This. Shimujuan was even more at a loss for words. Meng's words were all pointing towards Lord Sect Leader's indifference towards the Shirtai incident. How could he say anything else? That's why little sister had asked senior brother to come over because of this matter. Meng finally spoke the words in her heart. I'm somewhat prepared. Shi Mujuan nodded and said, Junior sister Zi Xia is pledging her heart to me because she wants to borrow my power and identity to get to the bottom of the truth about Shitai's murder. Meng nodded, if senior brother feels wronged, then just pretend that little sister didn't say anything. Shi Mujuan said in a low voice, I've already thought about junior sister Zi Xia's words. If it wasn't for this matter, why would junior sister bother with me? Although this is indeed unfair to me, but who asked me to be so dead set on liking junior sister? I hope that junior sister will stop thinking about other people once she's with me. Meng smiled bleakly, senior brother Shi, do you think that little sister still has the face to see him after doing such a thing? Although she didn't specify who he was, Meng's sad expression was obvious. Shi Mujuan felt as if his heart had been bitten by a bug. Shi Mujuan was overjoyed and said, then. Junior sister Zi Xia, please accept this purple phoenix hairpin. Meng looked at the incense cult's 10,000-year-old treasure on the table. She didn't seem to think that it was more precious than the hairpin on her hair. She raised her hand and felt as if she had lost the right to see him forever if she took the purple phoenix hairpin. Even though she had already made up her mind to sacrifice herself for her master's blood feud, even though she had already sent someone to tell him that she didn't want to see him ever again, how could she not be worried when he was so close to her? How could she forget about him so casually? Just as Meng wanted to raise her hand but didn't want to, she forced herself to do so. Suddenly, she heard a cold snort from outside the room, audacious girl. Lingxiang Peak, Inheritance Palace, Peacock, Chen Chen and Swift were still sitting cross-legged in the Inheritance Secret Chamber. However, their expressions were much more serene than before and they weren't as anxious as they were a few days ago. Peacock was sitting right under the light blue water elemental stone. Although she could not sense any elemental chi of heaven and earth when she extended her perception outside, but this tranquil cultivation made her feel a sense of joy in her heart. She liked it very much. It had been a few days since Peacock and the rest switched places. It was not far from the 18th day, but Peacock had a feeling in her heart, a feeling that things were going to succeed. It was a feeling that was hard to fathom. Peacock's perception was wandering aimlessly outside. Suddenly, Peacock had a feeling that her soul was blessed. She thought of something that the cult leader once said, everyone else was honing their state of mind in the refining heart cave. You guys are lucky to have mastered the mortal heart technique in the refining heart cave. With such luck, the probability of inheriting the immortal heart technique has increased by 50%. It's because the mortal heart technique has been mastered that the probability of inheriting the immortal heart technique is increased. Does this mean that the mortal heart technique is related to the path of immortality? Once I entered the inheritance secret chamber, I threw the mortal heart technique to the back of my mind. What a waste. But what does the mortal heart technique have to do with the ice developing incantation? As she pondered, Peacock thought of Zhang Xiaohua and the heavenly Tao that Zhang Xiaohua manifested in the refining heart cave. She also thought of the heavenly Tao that the heavenly Tao manifested. Suddenly, Peacock thought of the inheritance secret chamber and the colorful elemental stones. Immediately, Peacock's perception formed the childish trajectory of the heavenly Tao. She tried to connect the stars in the refining heart cave with the stars in the inheritance secret chamber. Peacock's thought was not a big deal. It was a sign of the formless nature of the great Tao. She turned herself into a formless being without the elemental energy of heaven and earth. In an instant, the elemental energy in the inheritance secret chamber, the water elemental energy was the most prominent. They all flowed into Peacock's formless body. At this time, Peacock had already sensed the heavenly Tao. She slowly simulated the heavenly Tao in her mind. She did not feel much about the elemental energy entering her body. It was as if this was a matter of course. Because of this unintentional absorption of elemental energy was similar to the absorption of elemental energy in Zhang Xiaohua's body when she was unconscious. From wisps to wisps, and then to waves, the elemental energy was guided by Peacock's perception. They were all absorbed into the pores of Peacock's body. Peacock's absorption of elemental energy had triggered a change in the elemental energy in the inheritance secret chamber. All kinds of elemental energy changed their original trajectory and drifted toward Peacock. Chen Chen and Swift originally did not have any perception of the elemental energy of heaven and earth. They were unable to absorb the elemental energy out of thin air. Peacock's breakthrough allowed them to sense the elemental energy of heaven and earth. Both of them had cultivated the traditional immortal path. Since they could sense the elemental energy of heaven and earth, it was not difficult for them to absorb elemental energy into their bodies. Therefore, when Peacock absorbed most of the elemental energy in the inheritance secret chamber into her body, Chen Chen and Swift happily split the remaining elemental energy into two. After an unknown amount of time, the elemental energy in the inheritance secret chamber began to thin and could no longer withstand the absorption of the three of them. All the primeval stones on the ceiling of the inheritance secret chamber were dull without exception. They were no longer as bright as they were when the three of them entered. Suddenly, the peacock opened its eyes. Its gaze was not much different from before, but upon closer inspection, there was a trace of pride and joy in its eyes. At the same time, Chen Chen and Swift also opened their eyes. They looked at each other and immediately stood up. They bowed and said, "Thank you, senior sister, for your help." Peacock looked at the two of them and smiled. "You two have succeeded as well." Chapter 876. Hearing Peacock's question, Chen Chen and Yu Yan did not dare to delay. "That's right, if not for you guiding the energy into your body and letting me know what the energy of heaven and earth is, I'm afraid I would have to wait a long time." Chen Chen smiled. Yu Yan nodded, "I have to thank you too, you've helped me twice, you've given me a new lease of life." Peacock waved her hand and smiled, "Sister Yu Yan's fate has arrived, even without my guidance, she would have succeeded. I just happened to be there at the right time." After that, Peacock looked at the darkened vitality stone in the inheritance chamber and sighed in her heart, "No wonder Grand Leader has doubts." Although this vitality stone is under the protection of the sect-protecting Grand Formation, it has been used for tens of thousands of years. It is a miracle that it has lasted until now. I wonder how the next Grand Leader will inherit this treasure. Could it be that the immortal Tao of my incense cult can't be passed down? Seeing that Peacock did not look happy, Yu Yan did not say much, but Chen Chen jumped to Peacock's side and smiled, "Sister Yu Yan has inherited our Xiangism, why aren't you happy? In the future, should I call you Sister Leader?" Peacock looked at Chen Chen and smiled, "How about it, if you want the leader to lock you in the discipline cave, you can call me that." Chen Chen pursed his lips and shook his head. "That commandment cave is just a small Yulon prairie. There's not even the shadow of a beast, let alone a person. It's very lonely inside, so don't mention it." Yu Yan looked at the two of them and smiled, "Sisters, this is considered a success, I wonder if the leader will smile when he knows that the three of us have inherited it." "Ha ha ha," Chen Chen laughed. Yu Yan was curious, "Sister Chen, what are you laughing at?" Chen Chen covered his mouth and tried to stop laughing, I was thinking if the leader laughed, what would he look like, who would he lock in the discipline cave?" Peacock smiled sweetly, "Let's go, let the leader be happy and inform the other masters, I'm sure both of them are anxious." Chen Chen and Swift were already at Peacock's beck and call, so they nodded in agreement. When the three of them left the inheritance palace, they didn't see Nun Jingyi, so they could only go to Mo Xian Palace. After hearing the report from the disciple on duty, they learned of Nun Jingyi's whereabouts. Only then did they send a disciple to inform Nun Jingfan and Nun Xuezhen that the three of them had come out of seclusion. The three of them then headed towards Zixia's location. Zixia and Shimujuan were stunned when they heard the scolding. Shimujuan reacted quickly and his expression changed. However, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. He immediately stood up and walked quickly to the door. He bowed and said, "Welcome, sect leader." Zixia was shocked as well. She had heard Shi Mujuan mention the Grand Hierarch, but she never thought that the Grand Hierarch would arrive so quickly. As her face turned pale, a look of determination flashed across her eyes. Most of her gaze was fixed fiercely on Shi Mujuan's back. When Zixia stood up and walked to the door, Nun Jingyi and Nun Jinggang walked to the door. Nun Jingyi glanced coldly at Zixia, then walked slowly into the room. She picked up a chair and sat down. Nun Jinggang was expressionless. She glanced at Shi Mujuan and sat down with Nun Jingyi's subordinate. Shi Mujuan looked at Zixia, then stole a glance at Nun Jinggang. He was about to speak, but Nun Jinggang stopped him with a look. Zixia sighed softly and walked to Nun Jingyi. She stood carefully with her head lowered and didn't say a word. Do you know your crime? Nun Jingyi looked coldly at Zixia and asked directly. Zixia bit her lips and said stubbornly, "Sect leader, don't know my crime." "Humph. You still don't know your crime? Talking behind our leader's back and making up stories about our leader is a great crime in the incense-spreading cult. I'm sure the sect leader heard what I said to senior brother Shi. Perhaps it involved you, but what I said was the truth. I didn't lie at all, so I don't think I've done anything wrong." Shi Mujuan looked at Nun Jinggang and probed, "Sect leader, I'm untalented but I'm here to accompany junior sister Zixia." Although junior sister Zixia's words were a little rude, but I asked the sect leader to consider her eagerness to avenge her master. That's why she overthought things. Besides, junior sister Zixia has only been in Mo Xian Palace for a short time. There are many things she might not know. Please forgive me. Shi Mujuan's words had some meaning. If Zhang Xiaohua defended herself, she would have agreed with Zixia. She would have said that Zixia was just stating facts and had no intention of slandering the sect leader. However, Shi Mujuan was implying that Zixia was young and insensible. Nun Jingyi glanced at Shi Mujuan and asked again, "Zixia, when you came to Lingxiang Peak again, did the incense-spreading cult ever neglect you?" Zixia shook her head. "After junior sister Jing Xian left, the incense-spreading cult took into account your filial piety to master and was very obedient to you. If you wanted to go to secluded orchid evening, the incense-spreading cult let Chen Chen bring you there. If you wanted to live alone, the incense-spreading cult gave in to you. I even changed your name to Zixia in hopes that you'll have a brand new tomorrow. This is the incense-spreading cult's painstaking care for you. Can't you feel it?" Zixia still shook her head. "Then, why do you still have complaints about the incense-spreading cult?" Zixia looked at Nun Jingyi. She didn't seem to have any intention of compromising. She raised her head and said, "Disciple's background is unknown. My childhood memories are unclear. I am grateful to Fragrant Cult for taking me in. Now, we've become an unwelcome guest. However, to be honest, with your current status, the person you met outside the cult is not worthy of you. I'm also familiar with Mu Jun. He's steady and has a good personality. He can take on great responsibilities and is a rare talent in our incense-spreading cult. He's suitable for you. I believe he's much better than the person you met before. Furthermore, you have no one to rely on in the incense-spreading cult. Mu Jun is the one who can take care of you. What you said earlier might come true. Your thoughts might not be completely wrong. Sigh, in any case, you have to walk your own path. Our cult leader only hopes that once you've made your choice, you won't have any regrets. You just have to continue walking down this path." After she finished speaking, Nun Jingyi shut her mouth and watched quietly. Shi Mujuan's face was filled with joy. He looked as if he was about to jump up and down. He stared straight at Zixia, hoping that Zixia would immediately pick up the purple phoenix hairpin at this moment. Chapter 877. Meng cried for a long time. Her gentleness had long disappeared and was replaced by a trace of stubbornness. She pondered for a moment and said softly, "Thank you for your words and thank you for respecting my choice." As she spoke, she reached for the purple phoenix hairpin. "Ha ha ha," Nun Jing-yi laughed and said to Nun Jing-gang, "Congratulations, senior sister. I didn't expect Mu Jun to find such a good girl. It seems like your Rue Jean Hall is going to have a joyous occasion soon." "That's right." Nun Jing-gang also laughed. "When the time comes, I'll have to ask sect leader." Before Nun Jing-gang could finish her sentence, a disciple ran in pathetically. He was out of breath and shouted, Martial Uncle Shi, it's bad, it's bad." However, the moment he entered, he saw Nun Jing-yi and Nun Jing-gang. He was immediately stunned on the spot. Shi Mujuan was looking at Meng with anticipation. He was about to take the purple phoenix hairpin. When he heard someone calling him, he couldn't help but be furious. Meng was also stunned and her hands stopped. Shi Mujuan looked at Meng reluctantly and smiled, "Junior sister Zi Xia, keep the purple phoenix hairpin. I'll ask what's the matter." Meng smiled sweetly, "You should ask about the matter first. Our matter isn't urgent. Sect leader is right in front of us. If he says that I'm delaying your work, I won't be able to bear the responsibility." "Ha!" Shi Mujuan laughed and looked magnanimous. He turned around and scolded the disciple, "What are you shouting for? How do you usually discipline you? You need to be calm in the face of a landslide to be able to achieve greatness." But the disciple stole glances at Nun Jing-yi, Nun Jing-gang and even Meng. He felt wronged and said, "But this is really a big accident." "Big accident?" Shi Mujuan almost wanted to slap him. He thought to himself, no matter how big the accident is, it can't be bigger than letting Zi Xia take my keepsake. However, how could he say it in front of Nun Jingyi? He only smiled and said, "It's fine. No matter how big the accident is, I'll take care of it. Even if someone barges into Lingxiang Peak, there's no need to be afraid. Just say it. Martial Uncle Shi. You actually know." The disciple was stunned and blurted out, "What?" Shi Mujuan was shocked. There's really someone who barged into Lingering Fragrance Peak. This. Who was so bold? Are you tired of living? At this time, the disciple was a little more cautious. He went forward to whisper in Yi Futian's ear. Who would have thought that Abbess Jing Yi's expression would change, and she said angrily, "You dog. Someone has barged into Lingering Fragrance Peak and you haven't reported it yet? Who were they and how many of them were there? What's the matter? Could it be that the Tenryu sect launched a sneak attack?" This. The disciple was in a difficult position and kept looking at Shi Mujuan. Shi Mujuan was enraged and slapped the disciple's face. The hierarch had already asked him to speak, yet he still dared to look at him. Wasn't this the same as drugging him? As expected, Nun Jing-yi frowned slightly. "Speak quickly, word by word. Tell me what you want to report," Shi Mujuan said loudly. "Then I'll say it." The disciple hesitated. Shi Mujuan's lungs were about to explode from anger. Where did this top-notch disciple come from? Isn't he asking for his own life? However, when the disciple said it, Shi Mujuan realized that it was indeed not suitable to say it here. The disciple said, "There's only one person who barged into the peak. He's already charged from the foot of the mountain to Ruijin Palace with his sword. Along the way, he broke the swords of all the disciples who were guarding the peak. Martial Uncle Ming and Martial Uncle Su were both defeated by him. Now, it's Martial Uncle who's blocking the restriction of Ruijin Palace. Although this person is already injured, looking at him, if he were to fight with his life on the line, I think Martial Uncle Hu may not be able to block him." Martial Uncle Ming sent a few disciples to Mo Xian Palace to look for Martial Uncle Shi. They said that the person who barged into the peak was a disciple of distant Fire Palace called Ren Xiaoyao. This Ren Xiaoyao is going to barge into Lingering Fragrance Peak, to look for senior sister Zi Xia. Ah! This sentence was like a bolt from the blue, causing the 4 people present to feel dizzy. A person barging into Lingering Fragrance Peak with a single sword. This. How heroic was this? What kind of affection? What kind of martial arts was this? What kind of disciples were the disciples of Ruijin Palace? They were the peak protectors of the fragrant peak of the fragrant religion. They had to protect the safety of all the disciples on the fragrant peak. They were the idols of the outer sect disciples and the goal of thousands of Wuming Hall disciples. But, such outstanding disciples were actually beaten to a pulp by an alchemy disciple from distant Fire Palace. If it was an ordinary disciple, it would be fine. But the so-called martial Uncle Ming and martial Uncle Su were disciples of the same generation as Shimujuan. They were experts among experts. But this alchemy disciple actually defeated them separately and directly barged into Ruijin Palace. As long as he passed through the restriction, he would be able to enter Mo Xian Palace. This was simply slapping the face of Ruijin Palace, trampling on the dignity of all the disciples who were guarding the peak of Ruijin Palace. Of course, it was a wanton trampling. Didn't you hear the disciples report? He broke the swords of all the ordinary disciples. Wasn't he just teasing you? Moreover, why did this disciple barge into Lingering Fragrance Peak? To look for Zi Xia. To look for Zi Xia, who was about to marry Shimujuan. Needless to say, after this disciple heard that Zi Xia was going to marry Shimujuan, he thought of barging into Lingering Fragrance Peak to look for Zi Xia and stop the banquet. Since ancient times, there had always been many people like this who flew into a rage for a beauty. Ren Xiaoyao. When Shimujuan heard this, he was puzzled at first. This name seems very familiar. After thinking for a while, he immediately thought, isn't he the one who was jealous of his third junior brother Yuzhuchuan? When did he get to know Zi Xia? Could he be the sweetheart Zi Xia mentioned just now? Following that, the top-notch disciple said, Ren Xiaoyao has a message for senior sister Zi Xia. Meng anxiously asked, what is it? The mountains have no edges, the heaven and earth merge, the winter thunder shakes the summer snow, only then do I dare to break up with you. When this was said, there was nothing else. Meng's tears flowed down and the anxiety on her face intensified. Seeing Zi Xia's face full of concern and anxiety, and even her tears, Shimujuan came to a realization. He could not help but be furious. Big brother, what are you doing? Since you already have Zhang Pinger, you should be jealous of Yu Laosan. Why are you provoking Zi Xia? Zhang Pinger is already out of your league. Is Zi Xia someone you can subdue? Moreover, I beg of you, brother, this is called having a foot in 2 boats. It's very immoral. I, Boss Shi, have been single for so many years and finally found someone who caught my eye. You're still messing things up. Unconsciously, Shimujuan's heart was filled with hatred. When Nun Jinggang heard this, her face was filled with astonishment and her eyes were filled with rage. Wasn't slapping Rui Jin Hall's face the same as slapping her own face? She had already lost most of her face in front of the sect leader. Now, what little was left was stripped away. Nun Jingyi was startled at first, then her face lit up with joy. In the end, she frowned slightly and looked at Meng thoughtfully. When Meng Gang heard the disciple's narration, she didn't care and acted as if she had nothing to do with it. However, after hearing a few sentences, she was shocked. When the disciple said that the person was injured, her heart skipped a beat and she looked at the disciple anxiously. When the disciple called out the name of the person who crashed the mountain, she couldn't be reserved anymore. She took a step forward and asked, Is he seriously injured? The disciple stole a glance at Shimujuan and said embarrassedly, this disciple saw blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth from afar. It seems like his internal organs were injured by martial Uncle Ming and martial Uncle Su. Martial Uncle Hu is known for his strength. Ren Xiaoyao, I'm afraid his life is in danger. Even if he manages to escape with his life, his internal injuries, Meng Gang cried out in alarm. She straightened up and wanted to run. However, after taking 2 steps, she stopped. She turned around and threw herself in front of Nun Jing-yi again and cried, "Sect leader, he was just possessed for a moment. Elder, hurry and pass down the order. Have the disciples guarding the mountain stop immediately. I've already explained everything to him." "Oh, no, I'll explain it to him now and have him leave the mountain immediately. Sect leader, you can expel him from spreading fragrance cult, but please spare his life. This is all my fault. I didn't make it clear to him. I shouldn't have gone to see him." Nun Jing-yi sneered, "The crime of breaking into the mountain peak can be absolved with just a few words from you." When Meng Gang heard this, she became extremely nervous. She turned around and looked at Nun Jing Gang. She knew that she didn't have much influence on the other party. She quickly ran to Shi Mujuan and grabbed the purple phoenix hairpin. She cried out, "Senior Shi, I beg you. Hurry and order the disciples of Rui Jin Hall to stop. I will immediately tell him that I can marry you immediately." Meng Gang was usually cold, wise, and even arrogant. When she heard that Zhang Xiaohua was seriously injured, she became like a headless fly. She used all kinds of methods and asked for help from everyone. She only had one wish. She hoped that her former lover could be spared. Earlier on, Shi Mujuan had hoped that Meng would pick up the purple phoenix hairpin. Now that Meng had picked up the purple phoenix hairpin as he wished, he felt humiliated as a man. His dream lover had no choice but to compromise for the sake of his love rival's safety. At this moment, Shi Mujuan no longer had his earlier magnanimity. He merely glanced at Meng Qi indifferently before lifting his eyes to look at Nun Jing-yi and Nun Jing Gang. Putting aside his emotions, even if the 2 elders were present, they did not have the right to order him around. Nun Jing-yi looked at the teary-eyed Meng and her heart ached for no reason. It was as if she had touched a scar in her heart. She sighed inwardly. It's easy to find a priceless treasure, but it's hard to find a lover. Therefore, before Nun Jing Gang could say anything, she waved her hand and said, "Zixia, put down the purple phoenix hairpin. You should calm down first before picking it up." As if she had found a life-saving straw, Meng turned around and asked, "Sect leader, you're willing to spare his life?" Just as Nun Jing-yi was about to answer, she heard a series of footsteps outside. Nun Jing-yi immediately looked up. Before she could see who it was, she cried out in surprise, "Peacock, Chen Chen. Yuyan. Did you all receive the inheritance?" It was as if Nun Jing-yi could see through the walls of the house and see the people outside. Chapter 878. Sure enough, before Nun Jing-yi could finish her sentence, Peacock and the rest appeared at the entrance of the hall. Chen Chen even leaped out from behind and shouted, "Honorable leader, you're too amazing. I wanted to give you a surprise and didn't let the other disciples come to inform you. We haven't even entered the house and you already know." Nun Jing-yi stood up and the veil on her face rippled. She seemed to be very excited. She walked to Peacock and the rest and looked them up and down. Then, she held Peacock's hand and smiled, "Good, good, good." The 3 consecutive "good" words expressed the joy in his heart incisively and vividly. What's going on?" Chen Chen looked at Meng and the rest in shock and asked, "Who bullied junior sister Zixia? Quick, tell senior sister and let her teach him a lesson." Then, she looked at Shi Mujuan with disdain, "Is it junior brother Shi? I say, junior brother Shi, you're not young anymore. Why are you bullying your junior sister? Why aren't you apologizing to junior sister Zixia?" Then, she covered her mouth and looked at Nun Jing Gang, "Senior Nun Jing Gang, please don't blame me. I didn't mean to disrespect you. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the purple phoenix hairpin in Meng's hand and shouted, "Io, Xia, this is the purple phoenix hairpin of our fragrant religion. I heard that there is a male and a female. Is this male or female?" Then, she reached out and snatched it from Meng's hand. Meng had picked it up in a moment of desperation. When she saw Chin Chin coming to take it, she immediately let go as if it was a hot potato. Peacock and Swift had yet to say anything, but Chin Chin had already greeted everyone in a circle and had a whole basket of things to say. Everyone was speechless. Meng was worried about Zhang Xiaohua's comfort, but after all, Zhang Xiaohua's life and death depended on the sect leader's words. Just now, she saw that the sect leader had some intention of mercy, so how could she dare to say another word? She was afraid that she would spoil the sect leader's joy and change his mind. Seeing Chin Chen's reaction, Nun Jingyi was not annoyed at all. She only smiled and asked, "Peacock, it seems that you are the first to receive the inheritance. Can you tell me more about it?" Peacock smiled and said, "Sect leader, your eyes are indeed sharp. You even know about this. I was thinking of reporting it to you." Nun Jingyi waved her hand. "That's easy. You'll know in the future." Peacock looked left and right again and said, "Our disciples are not that important, this is just a report. I think something has happened here, I would like to ask the hierarch to deal with it." Jingyi admired Peacock's methodical approach and nodded. "Peacock is right. And, you guys came out of seclusion just in time. There's going to be a good show to watch." "A good show?" Chen Chen, who was playing with the purple phoenix hairpin, was delighted when she heard this. She said with a smile, "What good show? I'm sick of it." As he spoke, he wanted to return the hairpin to Meng. How could Meng accept it? She only pulled Chen Chen's hand and pushed it to Shimujuan. Chen Chen would not give Shimujuan any face. She glared at him and threw the hairpin to him. Shimujuan could only accept it obediently and did not dare to say anything. Chen Chen was Mo Xian's disciple, and now that she had received the inheritance, she would be an elder in the future if there were no accidents. Furthermore, she was Peacock's junior sister, which meant that she would be the junior sister of the future sect leader of the incense cult. Her power would be on the same level as Nun Jing Gang's, which was not something Shimujuan could compare to. Yes, there is a good show. An alchemy disciple from the Fire Temple is forcing his way into Lingxiang Peak. Nun Jingyi said calmly. Fire Temple. Alchemy disciple. Forcing his way into Lingxiang Peak. The three of them were all astonished. Chen Chen even cried out, "Who is this thing that doesn't want to live? Lord Hierarch, let me go, I'll cut him in half with my sword." Meng's face immediately turned pale. "But this alchemy disciple is an old acquaintance of your junior sister Xixia. He's forcing his way into Lingxiang Peak to see Xixia and to stop Xixia from accepting Shimujuan's engagement token." Nun Jingyi's tone was still calm. "Ah!" the three of them exclaimed at the same time. Chen Chen jumped in front of Meng and said with a smile, "Junior sister Xixia, you haven't even taken off your hair clip and you want to accept the purple phoenix hairpin? Ha, I didn't expect that many people would fancy you despite your ordinary appearance. A disciple from the Fire Temple is willing to risk his life for you. You. When did your standards become so low?" Then, she glanced at Shimujuan and said, "This guy only has such standards." Shimujuan was embarrassed. Peacock looked at them and said with a smile, "Congratulations Nun Jing Gang, congratulations junior brother Shi. Xixia is a very good disciple. You have good taste." Yuyan stood quietly beside the two of them and did not say a word. Meng was embarrassed by Chen Chen's words, but there was anxiety in her eyes. Chen Chen asked curiously, "Sir Leader, where's that disciple from the Fire Temple? He couldn't have been dismembered by the disciples of the Ruijin Temple, right? Hehe, which disciple's subordinate is so daring to force his way into Lingxiang Peak? He even wants to covet our junior sister Xixia. This. isn't this the legendary toad lusting after swan meat? Nun Jing-yi said calmly, a disciple called Ren Xiaoyao. I've never heard of him. Ah. Ren Xiaoyao. These words usually did not sound like much, but in Peacock and Chen Chen's ears, it was like thunder. Is there a mistake? Why is he at the fire temple? Peacock said in surprise. Yes, is it someone with the same name? Why is Ren Xiaoyao at Lingxiang Peak? How does he know Zixia? He actually barged into Lingxiang Peak because of Zixia. Chen Chen also blurted out. Peacock and Zixia knew that the Zhang Xiaohua they met in the Refining Heart Cave was just an illusion and told themselves not to take it seriously. But when they heard that Zhang Xiaohua had barged into Lingxiang Peak because of Zixia, they felt a little sour and mixed feelings. It was everyone's turn to be surprised. Nun Jing-yi asked curiously, what? This disciple called Ren Xiaoyao, you know him? Peacock and Chen Chen both secretly criticized, nonsense, how can we not know him? In the Refining Heart Cave, Peacock said calmly, yes, I know him. This Ren Xiaoyao is one of the 10 medicine apprentices I brought back from the Rejuvenation Valley when I went to Carefree City to pay my respects last year. He was left at the Refining Pill Hall, but I don't know why he ran to the Fire Temple. Chen Chen also said hatefully, this bastard is good at deceiving people. He already held the hand of the third miss of the Rejuvenation Valley and kissed her on the lips. Their marriage was also set, but he still went to Lingxiang Peak to harm people. He's been thinking about her day and night and has almost become an inner demon. He's really despicable. It was unknown who Chen Chen was saying this to and who he was harming. Peacock blushed when she heard this, and even Chen Chen had a different feeling in his heart. As for Meng, her face was burning. Was Chen Chen not talking about her? Meng was stunned and her face turned pale. She looked at the hierarch and said anxiously, no, he wouldn't be like this. He never told me about the engagement. Meng's words proved that Ren Xiaoyao was the Ren Xiaoyao that Peacock and Chen Chen were talking about. There was no other person. Sigh, even if Zhang Xiaohua was here, she would be wronged to the point of vomiting blood. When did he hold hands with Nie Qianyu and kiss her on the lips? It was just Chen Chen's wishful thinking. However, this engagement. It was really hard to explain. Sure enough, the hierarch's tone was cold when he heard this. He called a disciple over and said, bring me Ren Xiaoyao's record. I want to see it. The disciple left with the order. Nun Jing-yi said, let's go. I've been listening to rumors for half a day. I want to see this Ren Xiaoyao and see what kind of person he is. He's familiar with the disciples of Mo Nong Palace and broke their hearts for him. And his martial arts are so good that a little medicine boy can break into Ruijin Palace. What? Ruijin Palace? Peacock and Chen Chen were even more shocked. They looked at each other and had the same question. Ren Xiaoyao can't be so powerful. What kind of herb did he eat? On Lingxiang Peak, on the main mountain path made of bluestone, there were 2 people standing straight. Around the mountain path, on the rocks, on the trees, on the open space beside, there were countless disciples. There were male disciples and female disciples with different expressions. However, all the eyes of the disciples were fixed on the 2 people standing on the main mountain path. Absolute silence. The person standing on top was topless, revealing his bronze-colored skin. The bulging muscles on his body were like lumps of iron. The midday sun shone directly on that person's body, causing him to emit a faint glow. This burly man held a copper rod that was as thick as a duck egg in his hand. His head was planted on the ground, and he squinted his eyes as he looked at the person in front of him. He did not make a sound. The person standing below was thin and tall. There was nothing special about him except for a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. In his right hand, he held something that looked like a sword embryo or a stone rod. The silence was somewhat strange. The person on top looked around and smiled. Kid, you're called Ren Xiaoyao, the person below smiled. You're mistaken. I'm Ren Xiaoyao. The burly man scratched his head and smiled. Both sides are Ren. What Yao? That's right. I'm Hu Ben from Ruijin Palace, Master Hu. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know who Hu Ben was. She only smiled and said, so it's Master Hu. I've heard a lot about you. Well, since you know Grandpa Hu's name, that's good. Hu Ben said proudly, because you disturbed Grandpa Hu's afternoon nap, that Ming Qing only told me to take you. Whether you're dead or alive, Grandpa Hu still likes you. If you surrender, Grandpa Hu won't need to use this god-killing rod. I'll just turn around and leave. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Master Hu is too polite. You should move your muscles and bones. Sleeping all the time is not good for your body. You brat, don't be so shameless. Hu Ben's face was filled with anger. He twirled the copper rod in his hand and shouted, if Master Hu makes a move, you won't be able to survive. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Imo Shuigong, who was almost within reach behind Hu Ben, and said indifferently, if there is no longing in your heart, living, what is the point? Chapter 879. No wonder you want to break into Lingering Fragrance Peak. So you don't want to live anymore. Hu Ben immediately understood and laughed, since that's the case, let Grandpa send you on your way. As he spoke, the copper rod in his hand swung in the air. Both of his arms bulged as he smashed the rod towards Zhang Xiaohua's head. Zhang Xiaohua saw the copper rod coming down, but she didn't release her divine sense. Now that she was within the range of Mo Xian Palace, she didn't dare to easily reveal her immortal Dao technique. Hearing the sound of wind from the stick and the intimidating aura from the stick, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Needless to say, since this Hu Ben was arranged by martial uncle Ming Qing at the restriction area of Ruijin Palace, it was because he saw through Zhang Xiaohua's trick of using strength to bully others. He also found a disciple who also practiced outer door divine ability to stop him. It couldn't be said that this was a deliberate plan. If Zhang Xiaohua dodged, not to mention losing his spirit, even his life would be another matter. Therefore, with a smile on her face, Zhang Xiaohua swung the heavy sword from bottom to top. Dang! A loud sound echoed throughout the entire Lingering Fragrance Peak. The rod and the heavy sword collided. Not to mention the onlookers who covered their ears with a shocked expression, even Hu Ben's hands were numb. The copper rod was struck high up into the sky and he almost couldn't hold it. Zhang Xiaohua was even worse. The heavy sword was struck to the ground and smashed into the bluestone with a ding sound. Zhang Xiaohua's figure was also pushed back for a long time and almost fell. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's hand held onto the heavy sword that was inserted into the ground and stabilized her body after swaying a few times. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua's face was a little green, with a pu sound, she spat out a mouthful of blood. The injury she suffered from fighting with martial uncle Su burst forth again. Hu Ben clearly didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua to have such strength. His face showed joy and he shouted, "Good boy, Ming Qing said that you have great strength, but I didn't care. Look at your small body, how can you be stronger than me? Come, fight with Grandpa for a few more moves." As he spoke, the rod smashed towards Zhang Xiaohua's waist. Although Zhang Xiaohua had a rough understanding of this person's strength, she was still injured. How could she fight head-on with him? She only twisted her body and dodged. The heavy sword in her hand flew towards Hu Ben's arm. Hu Ben said angrily, "That boy, didn't you want to fight? Why are you still using tricks?" Although he said that, he easily retracted his wrought copper rod and knocked it towards Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't want to fight with him. She only used the nameless sword art together with Hu Ben. Although the nameless sword art was exquisite, it was still a flying sword. Previously, when she fought with martial uncle Su, she was at a disadvantage and her internal organs were injured. But now, when she fought with Huban, the situation was reversed and she had the upper hand in terms of moves. However, every time there was a crisis, Huban would forcefully knock the wrought copper rod against the heavy sword, forcing Zhang Xiaohua to change her moves. It was the same method that Zhang Xiaohua used to bully the disciples of Sharp Golden Palace. This is really karma. I was bullying others just now, and now I'm being used against myself. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly to herself. Huban's strength was indeed great, but it might not be comparable to Zhang Xiaohua's. However, Zhang Xiaohua was injured previously. How could she compete with him purely in terms of strength? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was thinking about how to defeat the enemy, suddenly, a familiar feeling descended from the sky. In an instant, it was as if she was being peeped on. This. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but shiver. Needless to say, this was the feeling of being scanned by a divine sense. Could it be that the leader of Mo Xian Palace is here? Zhang Xiaohua stole a glance at the source of the divine sense. It was a few masked women standing at a high place. One of them was Meng, who Zhang Xiaohua wanted to find on Lingering Fragrance Peak. Looking at Meng Yu's resentful and worried gaze, as well as the anxious expression on her face, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel her blood boil. Since the leader was here, it was time to settle the matter of her trespassing on Lingering Fragrance Peak. At this moment, Huban leaped up and raised his copper rod high. A sharp sound of wind was produced from the head of the rod. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the raised rod and a feeling rose in her heart. Go, touch your head with that rod. Just touch it lightly. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's mind was only slightly absent-minded. She felt that it was strange. Aside from Huban's astonishing strength, there must be some secret to his rod technique. Seeing that the copper rod was about to fall, Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly. Is it just a competition of strength? Do you think I'm afraid of you? As she spoke, she also raised her great wisdom sword and pierced it towards the tip of the copper rod. The heavy sword seemed to pierce through the air, producing an ear-piercing sound. The surrounding air was also stirred up, and a gust of wind was produced out of thin air. Dang, the tip of the rod and the tip of the sword collided again. However, this time, it wasn't as loud as before. The two incomparably heavy weapons brought about a gust of wind when they collided. The muffled, almost silent "pu" actually covered up the sound of the weapons colliding by a lot. This time, the copper rod wasn't raised much. Even Zhang Xiaohua's great wisdom sword was retracted to a limited extent. Presumably, both of them used all of their strength. However, Huban used both of his arms, while Zhang Xiaohua only used her hand to hold her sword. The difference in strength was obvious. Unfortunately, this wasn't a simple competition. Seeing that the copper rod was raised, Huban took a step forward. With a twist of his hand, the other end of the copper rod flipped and smashed towards Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red. She forced herself to swallow a mouthful of blood. She pointed the heavy sword in her hand at the head of the rod. Borrowing the strength of the long sword, she floated forward and kicked Huban's cheek. This lightness technique was one of the simplest techniques in Jianghu. If it was outside of the fragrant religion, it would be considered valuable. However, in this situation, it appeared clumsy. However, didn't our Zhang Xiaohua want to hide her true strength? Ha! Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's kick, Huban also laughed. He let go of the copper rod in his hand and aimed it at Zhang Xiaohua's ankle. The wind from the fist created a chill. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't release her divine sense, she could still feel it. Not daring to be negligent, Zhang Xiaohua slightly retracted her leg in the air. With a chain kick, the other leg also followed. This leg was hidden below, so Huban was caught off guard. He could only raise his arm to block it. Feeling as if he kicked an iron plate, Zhang Xiaohua's leg also felt a bit of pain. This was a situation he had never encountered since he started practicing the Big Dipper magical fist. This guy seems to have practiced some kind of body-refining technique. Perhaps it's a legacy of the Way of Immortals. Zhang Xiaohua instantly understood. Nun Jingyi's divine sense that enveloped the whole place did not withdraw for a long time. Zhang Xiaohua could only use the technique to hide her cultivation level. In this way, Zhang Xiaohua and Huban fought for a while, but there was still no clear winner. Far away, Peacock and Chen Chen frowned and stared at the scene without saying a word. Meng's face was full of worry. She looked at Zhang Xiaohua and then stole a glance at Nun Jingyi. She didn't dare to say a word. Behind them, Shi Mujuan narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. He knew very well what kind of martial arts Huban had. He really didn't expect that the little medicine boy he had threatened in the distant fire hall that day would actually be able to fight Huban to a draw. Ouch! Chen Chen saw Zhang Xiaohua spit out another mouthful of blood and felt a little distressed. He cried out, "This Ren Xiaoyao is really determined to go to Lingxiang Peak. He has already spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Is he going to spit out all his blood?" Meng looked at Meng with her small mouth slightly pouted. Peacock frowned and said, "This Ren Xiaoyao's punches and kicks seem to be ordinary. His body movements are also ordinary, but the strength of his hands is much greater than Huban's. Moreover, looking at his swordsmanship, it doesn't seem to be common. It seems to be extremely unorthodox. I'm afraid it's not some honorable swordsmanship." Chen Chen smiled and said, "This guy comes from a small sect. How can he have any exquisite swordsmanship? Huban is not only the strongest man in Ruijin Palace, he is also the successor of the Way of Immortals' Magic Wave Staff technique. Although the Magic Wave Staff technique can't be used by him, it's still not weak. If Ren Xiaoyao doesn't take anything out, he will end up spilling blood in Ruijin Palace. That might not be the case." Peacock glanced at Nun Jingyi and Nun Jinggang and said in a low voice, "This Huban looks like he's using his full strength, but in fact, he's being merciful. It's as if he saw that Ren Xiaoyao has such great strength at such a young age. If he honed himself for a few years, he would also become a master. That's why he cherishes talent and avoids his moves. You shouldn't underestimate the Magic Wave Staff technique." Although Huban can only use 10% of its power, how can Ren Xiaoyao withstand it? Although Peacock's voice was soft, Nun Jingyi and Nun Jinggang heard it clearly. Even Shi Mujuan was paying attention. Sure enough, they saw that Huban's staff technique was far from its usual breathtaking power. Even the moves did not seal off all the angles. Shi Mujuan was slightly angry. However, if Peacock could see this, how could His Excellency not know? Since His Excellency did not say anything, what could Shi Mujuan say? Everyone heard Peacock's words clearly. However, Meng only looked at Huban's staff anxiously, afraid that one of his blows would break Zhang Xiaohua's skin. However, as time passed, although Huban was giving way, Zhang Xiaohua was gradually losing ground based on her pure martial cultivation. Seeing this, the anxiety on Meng's face gradually disappeared, leaving only a pale face and a determined gaze. Then, a slightly hoarse voice rang out, "You've met your concubine with your true heart. I'll serve you with my innocence. You. Don't worry. Since you've charged into Lingering Fragrance Peak, I naturally know your intentions. If you were to die today, I would not live alone." Chapter 880. Although Zhang Xiaohua was a little far away, Meng tried his best to send his heart-wrenching words to Zhang Xiaohua's ears. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She stretched out the Prajna heavy sword and dodged Huban. She laughed and said, "With such a dream, what more can I ask for?" After that, she shouted, "Brother Huban, do you dare to take 3 of my moves?" Huban laughed heartily. "Why would I be afraid of 3 moves? Even if it's 30 moves, so what? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she put her hands together and grabbed the hilt of the Prajna heavy sword with both hands. She floated up and raised the heavy sword high above her head. With a whoosh, she directly chopped down. There was no move to speak of. Ouch! In the distance, Qin Chen's mouth was quick. He scolded with a smile, "This guy is going to cheat." Sure enough, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua raise the heavy sword high, Huban also knew that things were not good. He didn't have time to make any exquisite counterattack. He quickly grabbed the two ends of the copper rod with both hands and raised it high above his head to block Zhang Xiaohua's heavy sword. There was a loud clang, louder than the previous one. Huban's arms were numb and the bluestone floor under his feet had cracked. Zhang Xiaohua, who was in the air, floated up high. With a puff, she spat out a mouthful of blood. But then, Zhang Xiaohua adjusted her body again, still in the same posture, and chopped down with the splitting Mount Hua. Huban wanted to change his move, but in such a hurry, it was too late. Moreover, he had just agreed to take Zhang Xiaohua's move. Although the splitting Mount Hua was simple, it was still a move. Clang! There was another loud sound, louder than the previous one. At this time, Huban's arms were numb and the bluestone floor under his feet had been shattered. The copper rod that was as thick as a goose egg in his hand was somewhat bent. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua again. She was still the same, spitting out a mouthful of blood. It was obvious that her injury was more serious than Huban's. This bastard is going all out. Hu Ben thought to himself. He couldn't help but cherish talent even more. However, in this head-on confrontation, he didn't dare to slack off. He only hoped that he could reveal an opening between the moves later. While Hu Ben was thinking, Zhang Xiaohua's third move came. Zhang Xiaohua knew that if this move didn't work, he would have to solve the mystery himself. He was going to use the wind-riding spell to drag Meng to his side. Therefore, he took a deep breath and did not dare to circulate his true qi. Instead, he used all his strength to chop down. Clang! The third loud noise was followed by a plop. Huban fell to the ground with the limestone tiles beneath his feet already shattered. His feet had sunk into the mountain path, and his hands were bleeding from the wounds. The bronze staff was thrown to the side by Huban, and it was no longer in its original shape. The middle of the staff was bent quite a bit. Zhang Xiaohua was even more miserable. She was sent flying and fell outside the mountain path. She couldn't stand up, and a large mouthful of blood had already dyed the front of her clothes red. Hu Ben sat on the mountain path and rested for a while. He turned around to look at Nun Jingyi and the others in the distance. He struggled to pull his feet out of the mountain path and said in a hoarse voice, "Junior brother Ren, you are indeed a hero. I admire you. I originally said that I would take 3 moves from you, but my weapon was sent flying by junior brother Ren in the 3rd move. Moreover, it can be considered destroyed. This match is junior brother Ren's victory." Hesitating for a moment, he said in a low voice, "Junior brother Ren and junior sister Meng are indeed a perfect match. I congratulate the two of you in advance." TSK. Your action of forcefully barging into Lingering Fragrance Peak is something that even I admire, not to mention the group of female disciples at Lingering Fragrance Peak. In short, I hope that your wishes come true. As he spoke, he stood up with difficulty and picked up the twisted copper rod from the ground. He shook his head and casually threw it to the side. Then, he staggered away. Zhang Xiaohua had already stood up from the ground. When she heard Hu Ben's words, she couldn't help but feel warm in her heart. She held her sword and cupped her hands. She didn't know if she should say the word, "thank you." Seeing that Hu Ben had walked far away, Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and looked at the place where Meng was standing. She picked up her heavy sword and slowly walked over. On Lingering Fragrance Peak, the crowd was in an uproar. Hu Ben was guarding the restriction of Rue Jean Hall. Zhang Xiaohua had defeated him. In just a few steps, she had entered the boundary of Mo Xian Palace. She was only one step away from breaking into Lingering Fragrance Peak. When Meng saw that Zhang Xiaohua hadn't lost her life, she was overjoyed. However, when she saw the blood hanging from Zhang Xiaohua's mouth and her pale face, Meng Xian's heart ached. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua approaching, she became increasingly excited. At this moment, Nun Jingyi's cold voice sounded, "Zi Xia, did you just say that you are willing to die for Ren Xiaoyao?" Meng was stunned. She glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and smiled, "That's right, sect leader. As long as he can live safely, I will do anything. What's more, he wants me to die. All right, then I will fulfill your wish." Nun Jingyi pointed with her finger and said, "Do you know the sacrificial love cliff at Mo Xian Palace? Go ahead. I will send someone to bring your corpse back and hand it to Ren Xiaoyao. As for Ren Xiaoyao, if you die, I'll let him live." "Ah. Really?" Meng was overjoyed. She turned her head and saw Zhang Xiaohua walking over. She could faintly see the fervent look in her eyes. She sighed in her heart, since the heavens arranged for us to meet, why did they arrange such an ending? He is so loyal to me. How can I not be willing to give up my life? Xiaohua, I will go now. I hope that in the next life, I will meet you again. Perhaps meeting you is my only goal in this life. Meng's resentful and determined gaze seemed to pierce through space and into Zhang Xiaohua's heart. Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached and she unconsciously quickened her steps. "Then, disciple will go now. Sect leader, I hope you will fulfill your promise." Meng finished speaking and looked at everyone. She quietly turned around and walked in a certain direction. Sect leader, Peacock, Chen Chen, and even Swift spat out. Although they didn't say anything, the expression in their eyes was clear. Nun Jinggang also frowned and said in a low voice, "Sect leader, you really want to do this?" Nun Jingyi waved her hand and said, "I have already made up my mind. There is nothing more to say." Then, she said to Shi Mujuan, "Mujuan, go and do the last test. Don't hold back." Shi Mujuan looked at Meng's departing figure and his eyes were filled with hatred. If Zhang Xiaohua hadn't barged into Lingxiang Peak, he would have already won the heart of the beauty. Therefore, he cupped his hands and drew his sword from his waist. He said, "Sect leader's decree." Shi Mujuan pulled himself away and stood in front of Zhang Xiaohua in no time. Shi Mujuan looked at the alchemy disciple that he had met before and sneered, "Ren Xiaoyao, you really know how to act. You actually wanted to hide the entire Lingxiang Peak. I boasted that my eyes were sharp, but I was also deceived by you." Zhang Xiaohua also sneered and secretly said, "Not only that, I wanted to keep all of you in the dark." However, she smiled and said, "How would I dare? However, you are a disciple of Rui Jin Hall. I don't even deserve to call you senior brother. How can I deceive you?" Shi Mujuan said hatefully, "You are a dead person. Wasting my breath on you will only lower my status." After saying that, he didn't waste any more time. He raised his sword and flew up. He drew a perfect arc in the air and pierced towards Zhang Xiaohua's forehead. This sword move looked very simple, but in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, it was extremely terrifying. A sense of helplessness rose from the bottom of Zhang Xiaohua's heart. The shiny long sword was flying over from not far away. It was like a shining meteor, and its trajectory was faintly resembling the movement of the heavenly Tao. Zhang Xiaohua had a feeling that the trajectory's destination was his forehead. No matter where he dodged, even if he escaped underground, the meteor would still hit him in the face. This is the true pinnacle of martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. It was just a simple sword move, a casual sword move, but it was able to demonstrate the essence of martial arts so perfectly. Only the eldest disciple of Rui Jin Hall could have such outstanding cultivation. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua also knew that some people on the mountain path of Lingering Fragrance Peak were more or less modest. Shi Mujuan's sword move was exactly what Zhang Xiaohua felt. It was the highest realm of martial arts imitating the immortal Tao. If Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, it would not be difficult for her to dodge or break it. However, it was not something that Zhang Xiaohua, who had concealed her divine sense and vital qi, could deal with. In fact, it was understandable. Shi Mujuan had been immersed in martial arts for so many years. How many years had Zhang Xiaohua cultivated the dream-weaving sword technique? If she did not have her divine sense to rely on, Zhang Xiaohua was useless except for her strength. In the blink of an eye, the meteor landed in front of Zhang Xiaohua's forehead. However, the Grand Bishop's divine sense was still enveloping the area. Needless to say, as long as Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, she would definitely be discovered by Nun Jingyi. What would happen to Zhang Xiaohua after she was discovered? Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to imagine. Perhaps she would be coerced, tortured, or... In any case, there were many possibilities. Of course, there was also the possibility that she would be killed on the spot by Nun Jingyi. However, if she did not release her divine sense, she would definitely not be able to dodge Shi Mujuan's sword. Of course, she would die. Since that was the case, then, perhaps she could only fight it out. Zhang Xiaohua had an idea. She was prepared to put her hand into her robe and take out the dragon binding bracelet. However, the moment she moved her hand, she felt a fluctuation in Nun Jingyi's divine sense. It was as though her attention had shifted to her hand. When he thought about Meng's expression and how she left in a hurry, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized something. Could it be that the Grand Bishop? Could it be that she was testing me? This thought was simply unimaginable. There was no basis for it. However, Zhang Xiaohua, who had comprehended the hand of karma, was slightly enlightened. There was an inexplicable reason for her to believe it. I'll fight it out. Since I'm discovered by the Grand Bishop, I'll be in danger of being killed on the spot. Why not take a gamble? As Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, he pointed the sword up slightly. He looked as though he was caught off guard. His body bent down slightly and he tried his best to shrink his head in front of his chest. He also raised his left arm slightly and was prepared to use his left arm to block the sword that would not stop moving. She stole a glance at Nun Jingyi and asked, "What did Xia do wrong? Why did the cult master issue such an order?" Chen Chen did not hold back and pointed at Zhang Xiaohua, "It's this guy who caused the trouble." Peacock continued, "Master, that tall and skinny disciple is the Ren Xiaoyao that I told you about. He used to be in the Pill Hall but somehow ended up in the Flame Temple. It's him, he's junior sister Xia's old flame." Chen Chen gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "He hid it so well that even we didn't know." What's going on? The two nuns were puzzled. "I told Xia to jump off the cliff," a cold voice was heard. It was Nun Jingyi who was standing far away. She waved her hand and said, "Come, let's talk at Mo Xian Palace. Tell Ren Xiaoyao to come as well." Then, she said to Nun Jinggang, "I'll have to trouble senior sister to find a disciple to check if Xia is dead." "Is she dead?" Peacock and Chen Chen were surprised. If she jumped off the cliff, how could she still be alive? Unless they were like Xia Zai from Shixin Peak, they were lucky enough to survive. However, Xia Zai jumped off from the middle of the mountain. Lingering Fragrance Peak was much higher than the mountains in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Suicide Cliff? Abbess Jing Fan was also shocked and blurted out, "Xia is going to jump off the cliff for Ren Xiaoyao?" Peacock and Chen Chen heard this and knew that their master was implying something. The cult master did not say that jumping off the cliff had anything to do with Ren Xiaoyao, and their master immediately understood. Sure enough, Nun Jingyi nodded and sighed, "Xia is really stubborn. If we can only do this. Let's hope so." Nun Jing Fan agreed. Why are there Flame Temple disciples following them to Mo Xian Palace? Chen Chen's eyes were sharp and saw Zhang Pinger and Peacock far away. Zhang Pinger's face was a mixture of joy and worry. Humph! Flame Temple hid such a great master, and the temple master cannot absolve himself from the blame. They did not dare to come up, so they naturally sent disciples to find out. Let them go back. When this is over, we'll settle the score with their temple master. Inside Mo Xian Palace, there was a dazzling hall. Nun Jing-yi was sitting in the middle of the hall. Nun Jing-gang, Nun Jing-fan, and Nun Shuizhen were also seated. There were also a few unknown elders sitting in their respective seats. Peacock, Chen Chen, Yuyan, and Shimujuan were all standing in their respective seats. Only Zhang Xiaohua's clothes were messy and his chest was still stained with blood. He stood silently in the middle of the hall. His face was calm, but his eyes were looking around for traces of dream. Nun Jing-yi sat there with a small booklet in her hand. She carefully flipped through it and put it down after a long while. She looked coldly at Zhang Xiaohua and ignored him. She then turned to Peacock and the others and smiled. Peacock, Chen Chen, and Yuyan, since you've passed the inheritance, you are qualified to have a seat in Mo Xian Palace. Find a place to sit. The three of them respectfully bowed and found a place to sit. How dare you, Ren Xiaoyao? You dared to deceive me by hiding your identity and sneaking into my sect. Tell me, who are you? What is your purpose in coming to Mo Xian sect? Nun Jing-yi shouted suddenly. It was as if she had used some kind of immortal technique. Zhang Xiaohua felt dizzy for no reason. He opened his mouth and said, I. Before he could finish the word I, his mind immediately became clear. He thought to himself, this is bad. This sect leader's immortal technique is really powerful. There is a difference between having an inheritance and not having one. She can play so many tricks with just a normal divine sense. Should I be honest with him? Or should I tell her half of the truth? Zhang Xiaohua knew about the book that Nun Jing-yi had just read. He didn't dare to release his divine sense, so naturally, he didn't know what was recorded in it. However, after listening to Nun Jing-yi's question, he assumed that the book recorded the process of him entering Mo Xian's sect and his background. The process didn't need to be said. Zhang Xiaohua didn't intend to hide it, but what about his background? Zhang Xiaohua didn't believe that Mo Xian's sect could expose his true identity. Otherwise, Nun Jing-yi wouldn't be talking about Ren Xiaoyao, but Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua steeled his heart, looked left and right, and respectfully said, Greetings, leader. When this little one entered the fragrant religion, there were indeed some things that were hidden. However, those were some things that were difficult to say. If leader asks, this little one will tell you in full detail. However, before I speak, can I see Meng Zixia? Heh, you still want to see Zixia at this time? Nun Jing-yi sneered. You are Rejuvenation Valley's prospective son-in-law. Although you haven't bowed to heaven and earth, your status has already been set. What qualifications do you have to see Zixia? Zhang Xiaohua was dejected as he said, Please be merciful, Sir Sect Leader. This lowly one was misunderstood by Zixia because of this. This lowly one barged into Lingering Fragrance Peak to let Zixia listen to this lowly one's explanation. This lowly one feels that it's better to say it in front of Zixia. Humph, you've already violated the rules of Mo Xian's sect by rushing to Lingering Fragrance Peak. It's a crime punishable by death. You still want to use your tongue to deceive the disciples of Mo Xian's sect? Zhang Xiaohua was very calm as he said in a deep voice, This lowly one knows that trespassing on Lingering Fragrance Peak is a great crime, but this lowly one only wants to see Zixia in a dignified manner and explain my misunderstanding clearly. As for the death penalty and such, it's better to wait until Zixia forgives this lowly one. What a joke. This Xiaoxia came to Lingering Fragrance Peak to look for a dream. Why should I explain to you? Although your immortal Tao is more powerful than mine, it doesn't mean you can capture me in one go. Things like the death penalty. Oh my god, I'm really scared. This Xiaoxia has a 50-year-old mother and an unsettled wife. I don't want to accept the death penalty. Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, but he still frowned at Nun Jingyi. Mo Xian's sect was under her control. If he wanted to see Zixia sect, he needed her approval. But, it's really a dream. Why did it leave just like that? Don't tell me you don't want to hear my explanation. How did Zixia meet someone like you? Nun Jingyi said, you were so impetuous. You thought your martial arts were superior, so you rushed to Lingering Fragrance Peak and provoked the death penalty. Zixia's sect jumped off Lingering Fragrance Peak's martyr cliff for you. She exchanged her life for yours. In exchange, this sect won't pursue your crime and won't take your life. What? Zixia. She left just now to go to Martyr Cliff. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Zixia's sect's dream to choose her own death without hesitation for his sake. He also understood why Shimujuan's sword was blocked by the sect leader. Chapter 882. Where is Martyrdom Cliff? Zhang Xiaohua asked anxiously. However, he was immediately disappointed. Dream had left for a long time. Even if he arrived now, how could she still be lingering on Martyrdom Cliff? What? Do you want to go? Nun Jingyi sneered, do you want to see if Zixia is still there? Or do you want to jump down? Of course I want to jump down and see. Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. Hee, your wish is beautiful. Nun Jingyi said sarcastically, unfortunately, you don't have the qualifications. Zhang Xiaohua was angry. He wasn't angry because of Nun Jingyi, but because of himself. He was angry at his own impulsiveness. He even regretted his actions of rushing up Martyrdom Peak. If he knew this would happen, why didn't he quietly go up Martyrdom Peak and explain things to Dream before taking her away? Wouldn't that have been better? He painstakingly concealed his cultivation and fought his way up Martyrdom Peak. Was this the end he got? An end that was separated from Dream's yin and yang? In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was filled with despair and emptiness. A sense of powerlessness filled his heart. Pa! Zhang Xiaohua slapped himself in the face. It was a ruthless slap. A stream of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. What's the use of concealing your cultivation? What's the use of blindly seeking perfection? Dream, she was still forced to death by this old witch. A voice rose from Zhang Xiaohua's chest. His eyes, which had always been calm and clear, were now gradually burning with raging fury. So what if we barge into the Lingering Fragrance Peak? So what if we massacre the Lingering Fragrance Peak? At worst, I'll go to the underworld with Dream. Suddenly raising his head, Zhang Xiaohua stared at Nun Jingyi who was sitting high up in the distance. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate her veil. What? Do you still want to challenge me? Nun Jingyi coldly said, young man, let's not talk about your martial arts. Even if you cultivate for 60 years, your martial arts won't be a match for me. Although there's a good saying that even the heavens can forgive the mistakes of young people. Unfortunately, there are some mistakes that cannot be made. As long as you make a mistake, you must accept severe punishment. This kind of punishment is something you will never imagine and will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Zhang Xiaohua raised the great wisdom sword and slowly walked forward. Now that the dream was no longer here, what else did he need to hide? Right now, he only wanted to fight with the mysterious sect leader and vent the grief and indignation in his heart. Even if he lost and died, he could walk on the path of the netherworld with his dreams. Ren Xiaoyao, what are you doing? Chen Chen was the first to lose his patience and stood up to shout. Peacock was also anxious, Ren Xiaoyao, how dare you challenge the hierarch's authority? If this wasn't Mo Xian's palace, if Master wasn't by the side, if His Excellency cult leader wasn't watching from above, these two people might have already flown up. Unfortunately, how could the current Zhang Xiaohua listen to these words? A rare impulse, a rare anger, and a rare hot-bloodedness drove this young man slowly and somewhat unsteadily towards Nun Jingyi. Nun Jingyi only watched silently and didn't seem to make any movements. Shi Mujuan, who was standing far away, had a cold smile on his face. Seeing that he was about to close the distance of 10 feet, Zhang Xiaohua was about to release his divine sense. Suddenly, a voice came from behind, Xiao. Xiao Yao, what are you doing? That voice was soft, hoarse, and weak, but in Zhang Xiaohua's ears, it was like the sound of nature. His anger immediately calmed down and he looked back in disbelief. Wasn't the person standing in front of the hall dressed in palace attire Dream? However, the palace attire didn't look very suitable and Dream's hair was still wet. When Zhang Xiaohua saw Dream, he was like a mouse that saw rice. How could he still care about arguing with Nun Jingyi? He turned around and ran towards the hall's entrance. However, with his body, his steps were a little unsteady and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. And, halfway through running, he didn't forget to turn back and glare at Nun Jingyi. I was almost fooled by her. When Dream saw Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, she hurriedly ran in and said, Xiao. Xiao Yao, slow down, you're still injured. But as she ran, she couldn't help but let her tears flow out. Just as she was about to reach him, she heard Nun Jingyi's cold snort. Dream immediately hesitated and slowed down. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't care less and grabbed her hand. Their intimate actions were even more intimate than when they were alone in the Lihua Palace. Dream immediately blushed and tried to pull her hand back. How could she be a match for Zhang Xiaohua's 10,000 pounds of strength? She could only let Zhang Xiaohua hold her hand with one hand. Peacock and Qinchin could not help but feel a little uncomfortable. They just sat by the side and watched quietly, especially Qinchin, who pricked up his ears, wanting to hear what the two of them were talking about. Unfortunately, after a while, Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth and said, Dream, you have to believe me, There's really nothing between Nye Qianyu and me. That so-called martial arts competition for marriage was just me helping Huichun Valley out of trouble. The so-called marriage is fake. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think too much. There's really nothing between me and Nye Qianyu. I swear, really, if I lied to you, I'll be struck by lightning, really. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was no longer as eloquent as before. He only clumsily expressed that he was absolutely innocent. Dream had heard Qinchin mention that Zhang Xiaohua and Nye Qianyu's marriage had already been decided. She felt extremely uncomfortable in her heart. However, when she saw that her sweetheart had risked his life to fight to the top of Yixiang Peak for her, how could she not know what he was thinking? Just as she was about to speak, a cold voice said, Ren Xiaoyao, you rushed to Yixiang Peak because you wanted to explain this to Zixia? Zhang Xiaohua did not turn around. He looked into Dream's large eyes and was unwilling to look away. He smiled and said, Of course, why don't I do it because I have nothing better to do? As he spoke, he coughed a few times and some blood flowed out from the corners of his mouth. Everyone felt dizzy. This reason was really unexpected. Dream used her hand to wipe the blood from the corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth and smiled faintly, Your heart. I know, I have never misunderstood you. Nun Jingyi asked again, Didn't you rush to Yixiang Peak because you heard that Shi Mujuan was going to propose marriage to Zixia? Zhang Xiaohua was not in a good mood and did not bother to answer such a shallow question. I also know Dream's heart. How could she possibly fancy Shi Mujuan? It's just because I did something wrong that caused her to misunderstand. I told her clearly, so she naturally knows. Nun Jingyi was silent. Nun Jinggang and the rest were also silent. Only Shi Mujuan's face was ashen. Actually, the feelings of a young man were really pure. It was just that you have me in your eyes, and I have you in my eyes. How could it be as complicated as Nun Jingyi thought? After a long while, Nun Jingyi asked again, in that case, you racked your brains to sneak into Zhuan Cult, Shixin Peak, and Mythical Flame Hall to look for Zixia? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. That's right, he had been thinking hard about how to cover up the fact that he had infiltrated Zhuan Cult to look for Zhang Xiaohu. Nun Jingyi's words reminded him that his purpose of infiltrating Zhuan Cult was to look for Dream. Wouldn't that be perfect? This idea spun rapidly in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Zhang Xiaohua held Dream's hand and turned around. He nodded and said, Lord Sect Master is wise. That is exactly the case. Then, he looked at Dream affectionately and told her everything. Of course, this was something that Zhang Xiaohua had already repeated countless times in his mind. He told her about how he came from a small sect and how he encountered Dream and the Shirtai. He also told her about how he ate a mystical fruit overseas and gained boundless strength. Wait and wait. He continued until he heard the elders of Zhuan Cult calling him Jing or something. Only then did he realize that the Shirtai might be from Zhuan Cult. Then, he coincidentally met someone who wanted to kill Nie Qianyu and sent her all the way to Rejuvenation Valley. Of course, in order to reduce the possibility of Rejuvenation Valley being implicated, Zhang Xiaohua made himself sound more sinister. After Zhang Xiaohua finished speaking, the entire Mo Xian Palace was silent. No one could have imagined that Zhang Xiaohua's words were true. This young man was deeply in love with the girl he met a few years ago. He traveled thousands of miles to find her, spent a lot of effort, and went through countless trials before he finally found her. Was this a real experience? Ren Xiaoyao, you only spent a few days with Zixia. How is it that unforgettable? How do you know that she still has you in her heart? Nun Jingyi was puzzled. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and shook his head. Well, I can't explain it clearly. I only know that Meng's shadow has been deeply engraved in my heart. I miss her every moment. I also believe that Meng is the same as me. Then, he turned around and asked, don't you agree? Dream blushed and whispered, Lord Sect Master, Xiao Yao, he is right. This disciple also misses him very much. That day when I met him in Mythical Flame Hall, this disciple almost thought that it was a dream. The others did not react, but Peacock and Chen Chen were shocked. Sigh, there was a long sigh and Nun Jingyi said, your story really moved this sect. Sect leader, Nun Jing Gang, who was next to him, said, what Ren Xiaoyao said is really incredible. I can't believe it. Nun Jingyi looked at her and said, Great Elder, whether you believe it or not, aren't the two of them standing right in front of you? There are many strange things in the world and this emotion is even more strange. This sect believes it. But Nun Jing Gang wanted to say something again. Nun Jingyi waved her hand and said, Great senior sister, Zixia even jumped over the cliff of martyrdom. I think you already know my feelings. I will listen to Lord Sect Master's orders. Nun Jing Gang was silent. At this point, Peacock hesitated for a moment before continuing. This third challenge is supposed to be the easiest of the three, but the Forest of Testing Love has been abandoned for a long time. It should have been repurposed a long time ago. The disciples of my cult have to go there every year to train, so, even I have only just found out about the origin of the Forest of Testing Love. Furthermore, the easiest challenge is actually the most difficult one. Nun Jingyi said, marriage is predestined. Since Ren Xiaoyao met Violet Glow and chased her all the way to Lingering Fragrance Peak, these three trials are also predestined. If Ren Xiaoyao can't pass the third trial, it means that he is not destined to be with Meng. Don't even think about holding hands anymore. After hearing Peacock say that the third trial was the most difficult, Meng's heart jumped to her throat. She turned her hand and held Zhang Xiaohua's hand. She looked at Zhang Xiaohua's pale face with a conflicted expression. Zhang Xiaohua felt it. She lowered her head to look at Meng and smiled to comfort her. Chen Chen couldn't hold it in any longer. He jumped out and said regretfully, Ren Xiaoyao, actually, with your martial arts, just now, this third trial shouldn't be too difficult. It's a pity that you're heavily injured. How can you go to the trial forest? I'm afraid you can't come out even if you enter. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, Your Excellencies, please enlighten me. This trial Love Forest's hurdle, what exactly is it? Chen Chen said, It's actually quite simple. I just heard from my master that 10,000 years ago, the immortals. He covered his mouth as if he realized that he had said too much. He quickly covered it up. 10,000 years ago, the ancestors felt the loyalty of some of their disciples and specially set up 3 trials. The first 2 trials tested one's martial arts, the second one tested one's feelings, and the third one tested one's luck. Oh, you've been to the Valley of Orchids and know about the Valley of Orchids. This trial forest is a small version of the Valley of Orchids on my Lingxiang Peak. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. The Valley of Orchids is so big. Is there such a big place on Lingxiang Peak? Chen Chen rolled his eyes at him and said, You don't have to worry about that. In any case, this testing love forest is the same as the Great Orchid Prairie. There are many wild beasts inside. What you saw in the Great Orchid Prairie is also present in the testing love forest. Your task is to kill 100 of those blood wolves in the testing love forest and bring out their tails. Ah! 100 blood wolves. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and blurted out, 100 tails is also a lot. How do I bring them out? Chen Chen smiled and said, You just need to put those tails in one place. Then he said with regret, I heard that this task was very easy in the past. There are many blood wolves in the forest. As long as your luck is not bad, you can find the blood wolves in less than half an incense stick's time. Oh, I forgot to tell you. These 100 blood wolves must be killed within 3 incense sticks' time. Those 100 wolf tails must also be placed in a designated place within 3 incense sticks' time. In the past, there were many blood wolves. With your uninjured martial arts, it should be easy to deal with them. However, now that you are seriously injured and your qinggong is not good, the difficulty is not small. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that this year happens to be the year of the Valley of Orchids. Before the disciples of Mo Xian Palace went to the Valley of Orchids, they first practiced in the trial forest. The wild beasts inside were almost killed by us. If you go in now, there may not even be 100 blood wolves in the trial forest. Ah! Zhang Xiaohua was surprised again and said to Nun Jingyi, Leader, isn't this making things difficult for this disciple? Nun Jingyi said coldly, Didn't I say it just now? Marriage is predestined by the heavens. If the heavens grant your wish, then, there will definitely be 100 blood wolves in the testing love forest, not just 99. Moreover, you will definitely find them within half an incense stick's time. If not, why do you think the ancestors of my sect set this rule? Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Yes, the rules passed down by the incense cult had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Although there were some strange things in it, there was absolutely no possibility of an exception for her. Thinking about the leniency of some people in Ruijin Palace today, she did not know if they knew about this rule. Meng Yi held Zhang Xiaohua's hand and whispered, It's better. Don't go. You have been fighting hard for a long time, how can you still have the strength? Your internal force must have been exhausted. If you go in now, won't you become food in the stomach of the wild beasts? Zhang Xiaohua shook his head, Don't worry, I have my own way. You can sacrifice yourself to jump off the cliff for me, so what if I sacrifice a little for you? With that, Zhang Xiaohua touched his chest and said, disciple is injured. Can we do it at another time? No, now. Xiaoyao. Meng Yi was still not used to this name. Her mouth called out, but she was reluctant to let go of her hand. Yes, since she jumped off the cliff, she did not think that she could come back alive. But what surprised her was that she fell into the cold pool under the cliff. When her disciple brought her back to Mo Xian Palace and saw Zhang Xiaohua, she had already abandoned any previous thoughts. She just wanted to let him hold her hand like this and stay together until they were old. Now, before the palm of her hand was warm, they had to separate again. This separation was the separation of life and death. If what Qin Qin said was true, even if there were not many fierce beasts in the testing forest, Zhang Xiaohua was injured, and he was not a match for 1 or 2 blood wolves. Not to mention, if he wanted to pass, he must risk his life to kill 100 blood wolves. Meng Yi did not hesitate to believe this. Zhang Xiaohua knew Meng Yi's mood. He pinched her palm with his finger, blinked his left eye and whispered, "It's okay, really. I will come back in a while. It's just 3 hours. Compared with the time we will spend together in the future, it's really not a big deal." Then, "You must be careful." Meng Yi bit her lips and said, "Even if you can't kill so many blood wolves, don't take risks. As long as you stay alive, we still have a chance." "Okay, I will listen to you." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said. After Zhang Xiaohua was taken away by the disciple, Meng Yi stood alone in the hall. Everyone was silent. Qin Qin sat below and was very close to Meng Yi. She raised her eyes and looked at the others. Unconsciously, she secretly raised her thumb and said in a low voice, "Zixia, you really want to, Your hand was held by him today. Or was it long ago? Well, has your face been kissed by that guy?" Chapter 884. What are you talking about? Qin Qin, Nun Jing-yi scolded. Qin Qin stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to speak. Nun Jing-fan looked at the pitiful dream and raised her head to ask, "Sect leader, what do you think? Ren Xiaoyao's chances of success are?" "What chance?" Nun Jing-gang sneered. "Not even 1 chance. Not to mention that the disciples of Mo Xian Palace have already wiped out all the wild beasts in the testing love forest. With his injured body, how can he kill 100 blood wolves?" Nun Jing-yi also smiled bitterly. "Marriage is predestined by the heavens, but it depends on Zixia's luck." Nun Xuezhen glanced at the dream and said with some hesitation, "Sect Master, I know some things that happened back then. I reckon that Sect Master is also very emotional now and intends to help Zixia and Ren Xiaoyao be together. Since you've already asked Mu Jun to spare Ren Xiaoyao's life, then, why can't you lift your hand again and show mercy outside the law this time?" "Show mercy outside the law?" Nun Jing-yi looked coldly at Nun Xuezhen and thought for a while. After a while, she said, "Junior sister Xuezhen, you're good at everything except for one thing." Nun Xuezhen was stunned and said in a low voice, "Sect leader, please teach me." You just like to be a good person too much." "Sect leader, this is reconciliation again. Is it not good to be a good person?" "Of course it's good to be a good person, but you can't be a good person too much. You can't be a good person who has no principles and doesn't care about the sect's rules." Nun Jing-yi sighed and said, "Let's talk about what happened just now." Ren Xiaoyao broke into Mo Xian Palace, which is in accordance with the sect's rules. He only needs to fight from the bottom of Lingxiang Peak to Mo Xian Palace. Mo Xian Palace is not within the sect's rules. I let Mu Jun fight just to test his status and martial arts and see where he came from. Ren Xiaoyao can't even take one move from Mu Jun, which is exactly because he comes from a small sect. He just got lucky and has great strength, but he doesn't know anything about moves. At this time, I can naturally be a good person and ask Mu Jun to stop. But the 3 tests of love were set by the ancestors and recorded in the sect's rules. Even if there's no chance of survival in the 3rd test, Ren Xiaoyao will still have to pass it. At this time, if I do as you say, show mercy outside the law and be a good person and easily let Ren Xiaoyao go, then what about the people who failed to pass the tests? Is it fair to them? And in the future? In the future, if someone wants to challenge the trial again, tell me, what should I do? Will I still show mercy outside the law? If I show mercy outside the law, won't that be unfair? But if I show mercy outside the law again, what about in the future? Won't I have to show mercy outside the law again? If this happens again and again, won't it become a habit? Won't the 3 tests of love gradually become decorations? Will the disciples of Mo Xian Palace be taken away so casually? When Nun Shuizhen heard this, her forehead was covered in sweat. She quickly said, "This subordinate is stupid, I didn't think it through." Nun Jingyi shook her head, "It's not that you didn't think it through, it's because you're a good person to begin with. You didn't think that such a simple and laughable action of yours would fundamentally shake the sect's rules. And the consequence of shaking the sect's rules is the collapse of the sect's disciples' beliefs. In the end, the sect will be wiped out and forgotten. At that time, the one who will die won't be Ren Xiaoyao alone." Nun Shuizhen immediately stood up and said with shame, "You're right, sect leader, this subordinate knows her mistake. Perhaps, from your point of view, you may not be wrong. After all, you did it out of kindness." Nun Jingyi said with melancholy, "But, from my point of view, you made a big mistake." She then smiled, "This is the difficulty of being a good person. You must be a good person within your duty. As long as you cross your boundary and challenge the foundation of the church, then you must restrain your impulse. Even if you can save a life, you must not stand out because the consequences of doing so will implicate the dignity of the church and will implicate the lives of even more people. This is the difference between being the sect leader and you being the sect leader." She then waved her hand and gestured for Nun Shuizhen to sit down. She then smiled at Peacock, "Peacock, do you understand?" Peacock nodded and said, "Being a good person seems to be a trap. It may look tempting and there are plenty of reasons to do it, but once you fall into this trap, you will lose your principles and cross the line. You will break the rules of the cult and in the end, you will mess up the entire fragrance cult. Sect leader, do you think this disciple is right?" Nun Jingyi clapped her hands and said, "This child is worth teaching." She then looked at Chen Chen and Yuyan. Chen Chen spoke first, "Sect leader, I will only be a good person within my duty. What do you think?" "It's okay, of course it's okay." Yuyan said shyly, "I will control my desire to be a good person and see the consequences of being a good person. Then, I will decide whether to do it or not." It's okay." Nun Jingyi nodded slightly. She looked at Yuyan who was distracted and said, "It's still early. Chen Chen, tell me what happened in the inheritance room." Chen Chen liked this kind of thing the most. He described it vividly and did not forget to ask, "Sect leader, how did you know that Senior Peacock was the first to understand it?" When your cultivation reaches a certain level, you will know. It's still too early to tell you now. The 3 of you are lucky. The 3 of you did not choose the same technique. Furthermore, from the looks of it, Peacock already knows the secret of the legacy chamber. However, this secret must be kept a secret. You cannot tell anyone else, or else you will fall into the trap of the good guys. Everyone shuddered and nodded. Peacock smiled and asked, "Sect leader, do you still want to teach me why this is a good person's trap?" Previously, I have already said that in the inheritance of the immortal Tao, cultivation methods and aptitude are only one aspect, but the most important aspect is still opportunity. When you enter the secret inheritance room and choose a cultivation method, it is an opportunity. Perhaps you will be able to choose a cultivation method that suits your own cultivation, or perhaps several people will choose a cultivation method of the same attribute. But in the secret inheritance room, there are only 5 types of primordial stones. If everyone knows, then they will definitely choose the same place. In that case, no one will be able to comprehend it, and everyone will be delayed. Wouldn't the direct selection become a decoration? Won't the inheritance of the incense sect be for nothing? I understand. Peacock said respectfully. Actually, this is because the way of immortality has been destroyed. If it was 10,000 years ago, this good person. Anyone can do it. In Mo Xian Palace, everyone was talking about the secrets of the incense sect. If it was any other day, Meng might be able to listen in. However, her heart was tied to Zhang Xiaohua. She was worried about Zhang Xiaohua's life and death. How could she listen? She stood alone and did not say a word. Her eyes were looking at the door from the corner of her eyes. Even her ears were pricked up, listening carefully to the movements outside. Meng did not know how long she had been suffering. Then, she heard noisy footsteps outside. Meng was startled. It's time for a result. The first to enter was not Zhang Xiaohua. However, when she saw a few male disciples from Ruijin Palace holding bloody wolf tails in their hands, Meng was so happy that she almost cried. Even Nun Jingyi was curious. Mu Jun, I don't think 3 incense sticks of time has passed. Ren Xiaoyao is back already. Sect leader, it's exactly 2.5 incense sticks of time. Good, Nun Jingyi was overjoyed. This is a match made in heaven. I have nothing to say. Yes, passing all 3 trials was the most difficult one. He completed the task before the time was up. Wasn't this fate bestowed by the heavens? What else could she say? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua enter last, Meng's face was filled with shyness. However, she did not go forward to greet him. She only looked at him with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua had just entered Mo Xian Palace. Before he could greet Meng, he immediately felt a divine sense sweep over him from head to toe. Zhang Xiaohua's heart trembled. He silently chanted the incantation. However, his face was nonchalant and looked exhausted. Zhang Xiaohua walked to Meng's side and nodded at her with a smile. Then, he turned around and bowed. Sect leader, fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. When I entered the forest, I encountered a pack of blood wolves. I didn't dare to be careless and used all means to kill them all. Nun Jingyi nodded and said to Peacock, Peacock, give Ren Xiaoyao some Yuandan pill to control his injuries first. Then, she asked her subordinates, how many blood wolf tails did Ren Xiaoyao bring back? The male disciple from Ruijin Palace respectfully said, Sect leader, no more, no less, it's exactly 100. Nun Jingyi was stunned and asked curiously, no more, no less? Yes. Ren Xiaoyao, is it this number? Sect leader, I also found it strange. After exterminating the pack of blood wolves, I realized it was the right number. Therefore, I came back as soon as possible. Zhang Xiaohua pushed all responsibility away. Well, all of you can leave. After the disciples from Ruijin Palace left, Nun Jingyi smiled and said, Ren Xiaoyao, Zixia, you passed the 3 tests of love. I have nothing to say and allow you to be together. Zixia was happy and immediately bowed. Zhang Xiaohua also bowed and said, Thank you for your gift, sect leader. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. Isn't the marriage given by the heavens enough for you to be proud of? What right does my sect have to interfere? Even the others won't interfere. Nun Jingyi pointed out. Nun Jinggang did not say anything, but Shi Mujuan's face was a little ugly. Then. I'll leave now and go down the mountain to recuperate. My injuries are not light after running around just now. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and was about to leave. You still want to go back to Lihua Palace? Chen Chen was surprised and said, If you go back to Lihua Palace, what about Zixia? Don't tell me you still want to run up and down the mountain. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he also scratched his head. How would he know what to do next? Meng's forehead was full of red clouds. Valley Master Nya, he had no choice but to help this disciple, so what? Nun Jing-yi said coldly, so you want the cult to reduce the punishment for Rejuvenation Valley? Rejuvenation Valley has been sheltered by the fragrant cult all these years. I don't know how many dangers they have safely passed through in Jianghu. Rejuvenation Valley should have fulfilled their duties and provided qualified medicine boys to the cult according to the agreement. But this time, because of you, they have engaged in malpractice for personal gain. Although this kind of behavior is the behavior of a good person, it has broken the rules. When the mountain opens next time, they will be severely punished. Zhang Xiaohua said in shock, esteemed hierarch, this disciple is stupid. This is all my fault. I used your kindness to threaten Valley Master Nye. I hope esteemed hierarch will reconsider. Reconsider? Nun Jing-yi said coldly, what's there to reconsider about this kind of thing? Your kindness to Rejuvenation Valley is a private matter between the two of you. You shouldn't drag the fragrant cult into it. You have little experience in Jianghu and don't know the rules of the fragrant cult. You can be considered not guilty because you don't know. But how many years has Rejuvenation Valley been in Jianghu? Don't you know this kind of common sense? Maybe it's because the fragrant cult hasn't spoken much in Jianghu all these years that they feel lucky and have slighted us. Zhang Xiaohua was even more shocked. According to Nun Jingyi's words, she was angry that he was able to sneak into the fragrant cult. She seemed to want to make an example out of Rejuvenation Valley. If that was the case, wouldn't he have implicated them? Wouldn't little fish Nya be like in the fantasy realm and be? Meng Xian's heart ached when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's forehead sweating. She didn't dare to speak and didn't know what to say. At this moment, Peacock opened her mouth and said with a smile, sect leader is indeed wise. She then changed the topic, however, Ren Xiaoyao and Zixia are the destined marriage of heaven. It should be heaven's good intention to send Ren Xiaoyao to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Although Rejuvenation Valley made a mistake, it is still according to heaven's will. Disciple just thought that Rejuvenation Valley hasn't made a mistake for thousands of years. Why would they have to make a mistake when it comes to Ren Xiaoyao? Perhaps that's the reason. Lord Sect Master is wise and will naturally be able to comprehend the will of heaven. This disciple will not say more. Moreover, Lord Sect Master said just now that to be a good person, one must do it within one's duties. Rejuvenation Valley's punishment is unavoidable. If Lord Sect Master is a good person, then wouldn't it be even better? If it was someone else who spoke, Jingyi Nun might not have listened. However, Peacock had just received her inheritance and was a candidate for the next sect leader. Jingyi Nun had some training, so she had to listen to her words. After thinking for a while, she smiled and said, Peacock's words are true. If Rejuvenation Valley didn't play favoritism, how could we be happy today? How could Zixia have met Ren Xiaoyao? Fine, I'll be a good person just this once. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and bowed, thank you, sect leader. Thank you, Lord Kong. Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. Jingyi Nun waved her hand, there will be punishment, but you have to bear the lighter part. After all, you were the one who caused this. Zhang Xiaohua nodded, that's right. Disciple is willing to accept the punishment. Go back first. We'll talk again after you've recovered. Zhang Xiaohua and Meng Xian left Emo Xian Palace. There were disciples to take care of Zhang Xiaohua. Not long after, Jing Gang and the others also came out. Only Peacock, Chen Chen, and Yu Yan stayed in the palace. Presumably, Jingyi Nun had something else to tell them. Mo Xian Palace was full of female disciples. There were probably no male disciples like Zhang Xiaohua. However, he was now a guardian disciple of Mo Xian Palace. There was a problem with his placement. However, there were many courtyards in Mo Xian Palace. It didn't take much effort to find one near Ruijin Palace. The good thing was that this remote courtyard was actually quite close to Meng Xian's residence. If it wasn't intentional, then no one would believe it. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua was very grateful to Nun Xuezhen, who was in charge of this matter. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohua stayed in Mo Xian Palace's courtyard to recuperate. Jing Gang and Shi Mujuan sat quietly in Ruijin Palace. The atmosphere was very gloomy. Shi Mujuan looked different from before. However, this difference was not something that could be seen by ordinary people. His face was as calm as water, his forehead was still wise, and his bearing was still graceful. It was exactly the same as usual. Nun Jing Gang coughed and said softly, "Mujuan." Shi Mujuan did not answer. He waited for Jing Gang to call him a few more times before he came to his senses. He smiled and said, "Master, why did you call me?" Nun Jing Gang was a little worried. "About Zixia. Since the hierarch has given his approval, let her go. Actually, I think you should have made preparations beforehand. This matter has been delayed by the hierarch for so long, so it's normal for there to be some changes. Moreover, Zixia knew Ren Xiaoyao before she entered the fragrance cult. You're not fated to be with Zixia." Shi Mujuan's eyes narrowed and he was a little jealous. "But Ren Xiaoyao, how? How can he be worthy of junior sister Zixia?" Sigh. Jing Gang sighed. "I knew you couldn't let it go. However, even if he's not worthy, as long as the hierarch says it's okay, then it's okay. You should give up." "But, no buts." Jing Gang was resolute and decisive. Moreover, that Ren Xiaoyao shouldn't cause trouble for her in the future. The hierarch had warned him in Mo Xian Palace just now. "Master, don't be nervous. I know my limits. I won't do something so boring." Chapter 886. I know. Jing Gang said with great hatred, "This Zhang Pinger is the Zhang Pinger that Ren Xiaoyao mentioned to cult leader in front of the hall today. At that time, I felt that this name was familiar, but I didn't expect it to be the Zhang Pinger that has some connection to Zhuo Kun." "That's right. Master, do you know that Ren Xiaoyao has always been used to interacting with women and using them to achieve his own goals? Didn't you see the third Miss of Rejuvenation Valley? Wasn't it because he accompanied her from 1,000 miles away? A single man and a single woman together during the day and at night. Didn't anything happen? Otherwise, that Valley Master of Rejuvenation Valley isn't a fool. How could he send him to spreading fragrance cult?" The whole story definitely wasn't what Ren Xiaoyao said. It should be that Valley Master Nye saw that he didn't have any reputation in Jianghu and recklessly married his daughter, which would provoke ridicule from Jianghu people. Therefore, he thought of a way to send him to my spreading fragrance cult. After he accomplished his skills and achieved a good reputation, he could smoothly take in a son-in-law. Previously, he met Zhang Pinger at the Valley Orchid Dusk. First, he was subdued by her beauty. Second, how could Rejuvenation Valley compare to the fiery hall of the inner sect? This time, he changed his mind and sought Zhang Pinger's heart. I don't know what method this guy used to make Zhang Pinger, who already had some interest in third martial brother, change her mind. He only persuaded Hall Master Yin and then incited cult leader to let this guy come to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Strange. Didn't they say that Yin was seriously ill and couldn't refine pills without a type of spiritual grass? Zhang Pinger's life was saved by the spiritual grass that Ren Xiaoyao picked in the Valley Orchid Dusk. Yin was grateful for her saving his life, so he transferred Ren Xiaoyao to Firely Hall. Who knows what happened in the Valley Orchid Dusk? We still don't know who picked the spiritual grass. This time, the Valley Orchid Dusk suffered heavy casualties. Although Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts are good, he may not be able to escape unscathed. Moreover, I heard that there was a precedent like this in the pill-expanding hall. Our lingering fragrance peak only bestowed a martial arts cultivation method and that was it. How could we be like Zhang Ping'er, transferring a disciple from the outer sect to the inner sect? Who would believe that there's nothing fishy about it? Ren Xiaoyao said that he and Zi Xia knew each other a long time ago, but that's only the words of the two of them. Martial uncle Jing Xian has already passed away, and there's no third person who knows about it. Isn't that just letting them talk nonsense? Disciple is sure that I don't know what methods this Ren Xiaoyao used or how he met Zi Xia and entered the alley. Alas, disciple originally thought that Zi Xia was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. How could? Jing Gang Shirtai frowned slightly. Ren Xiaoyao has only been at Lingxiang Peak for a few days. Why did he do so many things? Even the heart of a female disciple from Mo Xian's palace was taken away. Mu Jun, your words are a little unreliable. Moreover, the sect leader has already approved Zi Xia and Ren Xiaoyao's relationship. You'd better not think too much about it. All right, Master. Mu Jun stood up and saluted. Disciple wishes to take a few days off from Lingxiang Peak and go out for a walk. Master, please take care of the matters in the hall. Jing Gang Shirtai smiled. Go. You're always in Rui Jin Hall and haven't left Lingxiang Peak for a long time. It's good to take a breather. Remember, when it's time to let go, don't be too stubborn. Understood, Master. Disciple is preparing to pack up and leave. Alright, take it as a farewell now. Jing Gang Shirtai was very willing for Mu Jun to leave the mountain. She even exhorted, go out and walk around. Also, look for Zhuqiuan while you're at it. Ask him to hurry back. Is there any trouble on Lingxiang Peak that I can't handle? If the sect leader finds out that he's hiding like this, it'll be bad instead. Disciple understands. Mu Jun bowed and took his leave. Looking at his still tall and straight back, Jing Gang Shirtai sighed for no reason. The full moon hung high in the sky, the croaking of frogs was endless, and the alluring night breeze brushed against one's face from time to time. Under a small pavilion under the tall weeping willow, there were two people sitting. One was dressed in a brocade robe, her thin figure elongated her shadow under the moonlight. It was Zhang Xiaohua. The other person, needless to say, was dressed in a light green palace robe. She had pleasant features and a pair of big watery eyes that were filled with affection. She stared straight at the full moon in the sky, as if she was thinking about something. Meng, what are you thinking about? Zhang Xiaohua looked at the beauty under the moon and smiled. Could it be that you're still praying for something? How did you know? Meng's eyes moved as she turned around and smiled. Are you really praying? Zhang Xiaohua said in surprise, aren't I already by your side? What are you still thinking about? Pfft. Meng laughed and said shyly, you don't know how to be shy. You really think too highly of yourself. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head, that's for sure. If not for that, how could you still remember me after so many years? In your dreams. Meng rolled her eyes at him, then raised her head to look at the full moon that was almost within reach. She mumbled, fate in this world is really strange. I didn't know that the meeting 5 years ago was still so vivid in my mind. I only saw you once, and it was engraved in my heart. I can't forget it. Zhang Xiaohua walked over and reached out to hold Meng's soft hand. Otherwise, even if lingering fragrance peak is Shirtai's master, I'll still turn it upside down. Do you have that ability? Meng smiled and then murmured, if only you had that ability. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be angry. Do you look down on me because my martial arts are not as good as that guy's? I'll go find that guy and have a duel. She was about to take her hand away from Meng's. No, no, Meng knew that she was pretending, but she was flustered for no reason. She clenched her hand and smiled. Xiaohua's martial arts are the best. Others may not know, but how can I not know? Of course, with me by your side, you can go anywhere in the world. I know, I know. Meng laughed out loud, but then there was a hint of sadness. How could Zhang Xiaohua not see it? She whispered, "It's okay, Meng. Hierarch His Excellency just asked me to go to the ruins of Huanyu to have a look. It's not a punishment." I'm not thinking about this, Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Then what is it?" Meng hesitated and said, "Xiaohua, have you ever had any strange dreams?" Dreams? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shook her head. "I haven't dreamed for a long time." "You've never dreamed before?" Meng De asked curiously. "Hee, I have a dream in my heart." Who would still want to dream? Chapter 887. Meng stomped her feet and rebuked, "Xiaohua, I'm serious, don't interrupt." Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, Okay, you say it." However, she said again, "I'm serious, I'm not interrupting. I haven't dreamed for a long time." Meng looked up at Zhang Xiaohua and said with a smile, "You're a strange person. I've never heard anyone say that they don't dream." If I don't dream like you, how good would it be?" "Really?" Zhang Xiaohua frowned. "What kind of strange dreams do you have? Why are you so scared?" Meng bit her lips and said, "Actually, I don't remember these strange dreams very well. I just feel that the dreams are very real. For example, when I kill someone, I can feel the smell of blood." Hee, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Can you kill someone?" "I think you don't even dare to kill a chicken." Really, Meng was afraid that Zhang Xiaohua didn't believe her, so she said, "Not only killing people, there are many other things." "Well, I know." Zhang Xiaohua held Meng's hand tightly and nodded, "I believe you, Meng. It's said that what you think in the day, you dream at night. It's true. Maybe because you think too much and can't do too much, what you think in the day will be brought into your dreams." Really? Meng didn't believe it. She thought carefully and nodded, "Maybe." "Master. I had a lot of dreams in the days after Master died. I miss Master so much that I can't wait to catch the murderer who killed Master." "Well, I know, Meng. You don't have to worry about Shirtai. I have sworn to God that I will catch the murderer with my own hands. No. I will kill the murderer with my own hands to avenge Shirtai. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua had seen Deputy Hall Leader Su of Tuodan Hall and Yan's illness. She had a faint feeling that there was some inevitable connection between them and Shirtai's death. Maybe it was the doing of the spring equinox and Jingzha organization. She didn't plan to do anything to them before because she didn't have a good impression of the fragrant cult. Those people muddying the water, on the contrary, was beneficial to her actions. But now, the hated Zhong Pei was unexpectedly struck to death by lightning. She met Meng as she wished and was even with her now. She didn't have to worry about the Shixin Peak because Zhang Xiaohu was there to take care of it. She basically had nothing to worry about. Besides, Shirtai had saved her life. If these people had something to do with Shirtai's death, how could she not intervene? Alas, Meng still couldn't believe her and sighed, "Of course I meant it, but your kung fu is too weak." Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed. He wanted to tell her the truth, but when he was about to say it, he had an idea. If I say it now, Meng's heart will be at ease. But after all, there is still no clue. If I kill the murderer with my own hands in the future and give her a surprise, wouldn't that be great? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua shrugged again and said, "Don't worry, in the entire Lingxiang Peak, only you and I truly want to avenge Shirtai. Her spirit in heaven will definitely bless me and let my kung fu improve by leaps and bounds. And, she will also give me the ability to communicate with spirits and tell me who the murderer is. Ha, I know. Meng smiled, knowing that Zhang Xiaohua was comforting him. He only said, you should practice martial arts in a down-to-earth manner. I only hope that one day, you can catch up to that Shimujuan. I'll be satisfied. That tramp is nothing. TSK, how can he be my opponent? If I wasn't afraid that he would lose face in front of the hierarch, I would have broken his nose long ago. Pfft, Meng couldn't help but laugh, only you can brag. Hee hee, as long as you like it. Zhang Xiaohua said in a silly manner. Oh, right. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. Zhang Xiaohua said seriously. Okay, I admit defeat. I will tell you the reason right away. Meng couldn't help but beg for mercy. At this moment, he heard Zhang Xiaohua exclaim, what is this? Why is there a bulge in your armpit? What is it? And it is soft. Meng said shyly, your hand, where are you putting it? Quickly take it away. Ah. Zhang Xiaohua was also shocked. He exerted a little force in his hand and immediately knew where he was touching the dream. Zhang Xiaohua was still young and was not very clear about the relationship between men and women. Even when she was chatting with Peacock and Chen Chen in the Refining Heart Cave, it was, how should she put it, she touched Meng from the front. At this time, she only scratched Meng's armpit from the back. How would she know that there was something shameful in the front? Zhang Xiaohua quickly let go of her hand and said with a red face, I didn't do it on purpose. Meng's face was also burning. After a long time, she whispered, It's okay. That's right, quickly tell me, why did the leader let you go that day? Zhang Xiaohua quickly changed the topic. Hee, Meng laughed, actually, it is related to the leader's past. How should I put it? Back then, when the leader was young, she was a famous beauty in Mo Xian Palace. In the Greenwood Palace, there was also a handsome disciple who was skilled in martial arts. Senior Sister Chen didn't mention his name. This disciple had been admiring the leader for a long time. At that time, the leader hadn't received the inheritance yet, so she had a good impression of this disciple. The two of them were together under the moon, so there is no need to talk about it. Later on, that disciple found out about the story of the fragrant religion's Lingxiang Peak and discussed it with the leader. They fought from Lingxiang Peak all the way to Mo Xian Palace. At that time, the leader understood. Although she was very reluctant to part with our leader, she had to follow the precedent and let them pass the 3 tests. What was the result? Zhang Xiaohua was very curious. What result? Right now, the leader belongs to the leader. What good result can there be? Meng said in annoyance. Could it be that the leader went back on her words and didn't jump off the sacrificial cliff? Zhang Xiaohua asked. The martyred love cliff's leader naturally jumped, but... At this point, Zhang Xiaohua naturally already knew, and said regretfully, Sigh, could it be that that brother was like me, encountering Orchid Twilight, and the disciples of Mo Nong Palace killed all the beasts in the testing love forest one step ahead? Meng was surprised when she heard this and asked, Killed all the beasts? Xiaohua, then where did your 100 blood wolf tails come from? Is there even a need to ask? Zhang Xiaohua patted her chest and said, Our marriage is a gift from the heavens. I'm the blood wolf's tail. Keep bragging. Meng rolled her eyes at him and continued, the year your Greenwood Palace's disciple entered the Passion Forest wasn't the year of the orchid's late refinement. It's just that. Alas, it's just a pity. Although there were many wild beasts in the Passion Forest, but your disciple only managed to kill 99 blood wolves in the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn. No way, Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of surprise, that's 99 blood wolf tails, but there's only one left. Yes, that's right. Meng nodded with certainty. It's because of this last tale that the leader didn't get together with that disciple. Then, what about that disciple? Zhang Xiaohua also wanted to get to the bottom of this matter. Now, is he still in the Greenwood Palace? No, that disciple failed the 3 tests and felt that it was the will of the heavens. He was disheartened and stayed in the Lingxiang Peak for half a year, then went down the mountain. No one knows where he went. The fragrant cult is only so big, so we couldn't find him. And according to the disciples, when the Jinghai Lake opened, we didn't see him go out. He just mysteriously disappeared like that. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and thought of Yu Zhuoquan, whose body he destroyed. Didn't the leader try to find him? Of course he did, but in the 2nd year, the leader passed the direct selection and received the inheritance. He didn't have the time or the opportunity to find him. Yes, I understand. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. It's because the leader has such a regret in his heart that he values the marriage given by the heavens so much. That's right, otherwise, how could we pass so easily? Meng murmured. Chapter 888. With the red sun hanging high in the sky, Zhang Xiaohua, dressed in a brand new outfit, walked out of the small courtyard with Huan in one hand and the Prajna sword in the other. Outside the small courtyard, Meng was standing with a smile. When Zhang Xiaohua saw her, he couldn't help but smile. Didn't you say goodbye yesterday? You don't have to send me off. I'm just going out for a walk. The hierarch only asked me to find someone to help me. It's not dangerous. Meng tilted her head and frowned slightly. I don't know why, but I feel reluctant to part with you. So I'll send you off. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and said nervously, Isn't it too ostentatious? Will the other senior sisters in Mo Xian Palace be jealous? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's exaggerated look, Meng almost bent over with laughter again. She covered her mouth and said, Little Xiaoyao, who do you think you are? Which other senior sister will like you? Don't feel so good about yourself. Zhang Xiaohua touched his flat nose and said seriously, I don't want others to be jealous of you. It's just that they will be jealous of our marriage. Meng pursed her lips and said with a smile, All right, don't talk nonsense. Although there isn't much danger in this trip to the ruins of Huanyu, if you can make some contributions, firstly, it can prove that the hierarch has a good eye and that you're a competent guardian disciple. Secondly, it can be considered as redeeming yourself by making contributions. The greater the contribution, the lesser the punishment Rejuvenation Valley will receive. Valley Master Nya has already given his daughter to you, how can you bring disaster to him? Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed. He had explained Nye Qianyu's matter clearly to Meng during this month, but Meng always joked about it. Meng could joke about it, but he didn't dare to take it seriously. If he even slightly joked, Meng would immediately change her face. She was even more powerful than Chen Chen. Zhang Xiaohua was thinking about what to say, but Meng didn't listen to his explanation at all. She walked forward and adjusted his clothes. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was filled with warmth. It seemed that only his mother cared about him like this before. Meng, really have nothing to do with Nye Qianyu. Meng was stunned and asked curiously, You've said that 472 times already. I believed you a long time ago. Why are you bringing it up again? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. But didn't you just, Dream said, I'm just saying. Is there a relationship between you two? If there's nothing between you two, why don't I talk about it? Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss for words and wanted to explain again. However, Meng said, Let's go. It's already late. You should leave early and come back early. I want you to come back at night. Evening? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and thought to herself, although I haven't been to the ruins of Huan, it seems that it will take a few days. How can I return at night? When they walked out of the small courtyard, they still held hands. But later, more and more disciples came. Not only Meng, but also Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed. These beautiful female disciples, whether wearing a veil or not, all looked at them with a smile. It was not admiration, but jealousy. Meng hid in Zhang Xiaohua's remote courtyard and enjoyed the nourishment of love. She was free and unfettered. Now that she was surrounded by so many people, although she was proud and stubborn, she still had the mentality of a little girl. Besides being slightly happy, she was abnormally shy. She only walked half the way and blushed and ran away. Behind her, Zhang Xiaohua's face was also burning. She complained secretly, "I told you not to come, but you came to see me. It's like watching a monkey." After Meng left, Zhang Xiaohua was emboldened. No matter who looked at him, he stared straight at them. This trick was really good. The female disciples all bowed their heads and left under his stare. When Zhang Xiaohua was complacent, he saw a female disciple in a lavender palace dress looking at him from a distance. Zhang Xiaohua squinted and thought, there is really someone who doesn't know what's good for her. He also tilted his head and stared at her. Unexpectedly, the female disciple didn't avoid him and came straight to him. "Oh, I actually met a rival. Who is so thick-skinned?" When the female disciple came closer, Zhang Xiaohua saw her clearly. He quickly lowered his head and saluted, "Greetings, Lord Chen." Wasn't it Chen Chen? Although Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head, he muttered in his heart, "When did this girl dress up so elegantly? I almost can't recognize her." Chen Chen said in a low voice, "Hee, junior brother Ren, you are now a disciple of Mo Xian Gong. Although, you don't need to call me Lord Chen. You can just call me senior sister in the future." "Yes, Lord Chen." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. "Oh, senior sister Chen. I wonder where senior sister Chen is heading to." "Oh, I woke up early this morning and just happened to see you. Looking at your new clothes and the 4 odd beasts, I guess you are going down the mountain to Huanyu. So I came over to give you some instructions." "Yes, I am going there. Senior sister Chen, please instruct me." Cough cough, actually, it's nothing much. The ruins of Huan is a forbidden area of my fragrance sect. I'm sure the sect leader has already told you about it. Your martial arts are limited, especially your Qinggong. Inside the ruins of Huan, you must not go too deep, you only need to wait outside for the disciples of Mo Xian Gong. About Rejuvenation Valley, I've told senior sister Kong about it. Right now, Lord Sect Master is still angry, so it's not suitable for her to speak directly. After this period of time, I'll have senior sister talk to Lord Sect Master. After all, she was also the messenger who went to Vow City to offer sacrifices last time. Also, there is a female disciple among the disciples going to Huanyu this time. You should be familiar with her. She is Xia Qing, who entered the fragrant cult with us last time. They have been there for a long time. Maybe they had some adventures. If you meet her, tell her. Maybe she will give you some benefits." Zhang Xiaohua heard this and felt warm in her heart. This expression was somewhat similar to the illusion in the refining heart cave. After hearing Chen Chen's words, she bowed and thanked him. "Well, go. Go and come back early. Don't let junior sister Zixia worry about you." Chen Chen waved his hand and left. After taking 2 steps, he turned back and said with a smile, "Remember what I told you at Shixin Peak. If you have any secret marks on your body, check it as soon as possible. Don't wait for little fish Nya to come and make trouble for you." Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. She looked at Chen Chen's back, which was shaking with laughter. She opened her mouth and did not know how to answer. After exiting Mo Xian Palace, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Ruijin Palace. Coincidentally, he ran into Ruijin Palace's senior martial brother Wei. Thinking about how he had broken Rui Jin Palace's sword and snatched his waist token, Zhang Xiaohua felt a little guilty. He stepped forward and shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother Wei, please wait." Senior Brother Wei was leading people down the mountain to patrol. When he heard someone calling him, he naturally turned back. However, when he saw that it was Zhang Xiaohua, his face immediately became awkward. He turned back and saluted. "Junior Brother Ren, you. What's the matter?" Zhang Xiaohua quickly stepped forward and also saluted. "Senior Brother Wei, that. I'm really sorry about last time. I was also in a hurry to go up the mountain, so I made a move. That, I hope Senior Brother can be magnanimous and forgive me." What could Senior Marshal Brother Wei say? Zhang Xiaohua had barged into Remnant Fragrance alone with a sword and had long caused a huge commotion. He had turned Ruijin Palace Hall into a complete mess. Nanjing Gang did not say anything, but Shi Mujuan had scolded everyone. Although he could not punish these disciples due to the teachings of Remnant Fragrance cult, he reckoned that they had suffered quite a lot. It's fine. Junior Brother Ren's courage and insight are astonishing. His martial arts are also superb. In addition, he is unswervingly loyal to senior sister Zixia. He is our role model. I can't wait to be envious. How can I blame you? Hee, since Senior Brother Wei said so, I can rest assured. If there is a chance, I will tell the group of senior brothers in Ruijin Palace that I will apologize to them. Zhang Xiaohua then took out a waist token and handed it over. This is what I used last time. I'm returning it to Senior Brother Wei. Senior Brother Wei took a look and reached out to take it with lightning speed. He smiled and said, "This waist token has already lost its effect." To think that Junior Brother Ren still remembers it, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and secretly said, "It's already lost its effect. Why are you in such a hurry to take it back?" Senior Brother Wei was naturally unwilling to travel with Zhang Xiaohua. Along the way, the Ruijin Palace disciples they met all had the same expression. They were jealous, envious, and a little embarrassed. Zhang Xiaohua did not mind. She sat on Huan's lap and cupped her hands when she saw some familiar faces. She had already offended them a lot. Zhang Xiaohua was still aware of these trivial etiquette. Suddenly, a figure flashed behind the mountain rocks on the mountain path. It seemed like the person saw Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were sharp and she had already seen it. It was Zhang Ping'er from Lihua Hall. Looking at this place, they were already in Lihua Hall's territory. Zhang Ping'er must have something to do. Zhang Xiaohua patted Huan's protrusion and stopped. She looked at the mountain rocks by the mountain path and thought for a moment. She felt that she had something to say to Huan, but if she really said it, it would be unnecessary. She sighed and wanted to go down the mountain. However, she saw Zhang Ping'er peeking out from behind the mountain rocks and looking down the mountain. When she saw that there was no one at the foot of the mountain, it seemed like Zhang Xiaohua had gone far away. Zhang Ping'er then leaped out from behind the mountain rocks. However, when she turned her head, she saw Zhang Xiaohua standing beside her awkwardly. She couldn't help but blush. However, it only lasted for a moment before Zhang Ping'er's face turned cold. She was the ice beauty of Lihua Hall. Zhang Xiaohua bit her lips and cupped her hands. "Junior sister," Zhang Ping'er quickly stopped him and said coldly, "Senior Brother Ren is wrong. It's better to call her junior sister Zhang. Your surname isn't Zhang, so calling her junior sister is a little too much." Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said softly, "Junior sister Zhang, I think it's useless for me to say anything unnecessary. Actually, I didn't know that Zixia was at Lingxiang Peak, so I never had the intention to make use of junior sister. If junior sister has misunderstood or caused some trouble for junior sister, then I will apologize to junior sister now. I don't dare. Senior Brother Ren is the protector disciple of Mo Xian Palace. How could I, a disciple of Li Hua Palace, compare to him. Even if we were used, it would be our honor. How could I dare to complain? How can I complain and dare to accept the apology of a disciple of Mo Xian Palace? Zhang Xiaohua felt a little uncomfortable with this vague sense of unfamiliarity. If our religion does not fulfill his wish, even the heavens will be angry. Sect leader is the most benevolent, we all know that. The disciple smiled and said, if Ren Xiaoyao met other sect leaders, he might not be able to fulfill his wish. This Ren Xiaoyao is also a genius. His martial arts are not good and his moves are not good, but he is blessed with divine strength. It's really rare. It's just that, when he heard that Xia had died that day, he still held his sword and threatened our religion. He still has a rebellious side to him. I hope this trip to Huansu will make him suffer a little and let him know the dignity of our fragrant religion. The disciple smiled and said, sect leader is right. No matter what, Ren Xiaoyao has only been in our fragrant religion for a short period of time. How could he know the background of our religion? Using his sword to threaten the sect leader is also a great disrespect. Nun Jingyi waved her hand. Why would our religion lower itself to his level? Oh, right, where's Shimujuan? This child was agitated. He wouldn't do something stupid, would he? That's not true. The day Ren Xiaoyao stayed in Mo Xian Palace, senior martial brother Shi left lingering Fragrance Peak and went out to travel. What travel? He's only in the fragrant religion's small territory. Where can he travel to? However, he's also tactful. Sigh, actually, when Great Elder came to me to talk about this, our religion felt that it was inappropriate. Xia clearly doesn't have Mu Jun in her eyes. In addition, Xia wanted to take revenge for junior martial sister Jing Xian on her own accord and created this scene. How can Mu Jun keep his face? Mu Jun still knows when to advance and when to retreat. It's all because of Great Elder Jing Gang's teachings. Oh, right, where's Yu Zhuqiuan? There's still no trace of her. What kind of trouble did this fellow get into? Even you don't know. Sigh, you all have the same master. Why is there such a big difference between the two? The female disciple was embarrassed. This time, this disciple really doesn't know. After junior martial brother Yu returned to lingering Fragrance Peak, he only showed his face once and disappeared without a trace. It can't be the Tenryu sect or that strange power, right? The female disciple shook her head. It can't be ruled out. After all, many things have happened in our fragrant religion recently. The Vice Hall Masters of Pill Sprouting Hall and Cleansing Jade Hall, as well as more than 10 outer sect disciples have all disappeared. And, with the addition of Wandering Orchid and Muyen, it's really hard to say. However, the possibility of it being junior martial brother Yu isn't high. After all, he has a legacy artifact from our fragrant religion. Although he can't use it proficiently, it's still possible that he could use it to escape. The Vice Hall Master of Pill Sprouting Hall. This guy actually sneaked into the fragrant religion without our religion knowing. If he hadn't provoked the Tenryu sect and poisoned him to death, it would have been hard to find him. Oh, the Vice Hall Master of Pill Sprouting Hall should also have a jade talisman. However, Shuokun should have an offensive jade talisman, so he should be able to escape. Right, speaking of the Pill Sprouting Hall, go and inform Sage Herb. Who went to Rejuvenation Valley last time? Cripple his martial arts and demote him to an ordinary disciple. Yes, I'll do it right away. But what? I think that senior martial sister Peacock went to Sorrow City to offer sacrifices last time. She was the head emissary, and that person was the vice emissary. If we cripple that person's martial arts, won't senior martial sister Peacock lose face? Oh, you're right. Peacock's status is different now. If it was before the inheritance, it wouldn't be a problem. But now, we still have to save some face. That disciple is lucky. Demote him to an ordinary disciple, but don't cripple his martial arts. Yes, head emissary is wise. Also, inform the fragrant religion disciples in the Jianghu to not stand up for Rejuvenation Valley for 10 years. Spread this news to the Jianghu as well. Instead of doing things for our fragrant religion, they actually dared to play favoritism. It's their good fortune that we don't destroy them. Yes, head emissary is merciful. The female disciple bowed. Seeing that Nun Jingyi didn't say anything else, she quietly left. Zhang Xiaohua went down Lingering Fragrance Peak and headed towards Huanshu. However, after walking for half a day and passing a few forks in the road, his brain couldn't keep up. He had asked for directions, but he was a person with no sense of direction. He only knew that the sun rose from the east and was careless about everything else. He could only stand at the side of the road and prepare to play left, right, and left. At this moment, he heard the sound of horses galloping behind him. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. When he turned around, a strange smile appeared on his face. What do you think, head emissary? Dragging along the dust that filled the sky, the ones that whistled over were precisely Yu Zhuochuan's group that Zhang Xiaohua had encountered when he had arrived at Lingering Fragrance Peak the last time. It was still a dozen pure black horses that were abnormally arrogant. Of course, Yu Zhuochuan was not in this group at this time, and the leader had changed to someone else. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was an old acquaintance, he urged the 4 odd beasts to make way for them. When the group of Rui Jin Hall's disciples came closer, he smiled and prepared to greet them. However, when he raised his hand, one of the disciples shouted, "Ayo, it's Ren Xiaoyao." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but smile. It seemed that he had become famous after breaking into Lingering Fragrance Peak. Others might not know, but the disciples of Rui Jin Hall remembered him well. When he turned around, he saw that it was the reckless disciple that he met last time, junior brother Feng. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands. "Senior brother Feng, are you well?" Then, he looked around and smiled. "Where's senior brother Yu? Why don't I see him with you?" "Senior brother Yu, long time no see." Just when junior brother Feng opened his mouth, someone beside him berated, "Junior brother Feng." Junior brother Feng realized that he had blurted out, so he shouted, "Why are you looking for senior brother Yu? When you broke into Lingering Fragrance Peak, we weren't around. Even senior brother Yu was busy. Otherwise, how could you have broken through so easily?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "That's right. Actually, it was all thanks to the kindness of the senior brothers and martial uncles of Rui Jin Hall. They saw my painstaking effort and let me go. Others might not know, but I know very well. I really have to thank them." When the disciple heard that, he didn't have any good intentions. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother Ren's words have caused the sect leader to misunderstand. If she knows about it, she will think that the disciples of Rui Jin Hall are slacking. Some punishment will be unavoidable. Martial Uncle Ming, Martial Uncle Hu, and Martial Uncle Su will also be punished." Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, hee, "Then, just treat it as if I didn't say anything." The disciple frowned and sneered, "If that's all junior brother Ren wanted to say, then I didn't hear anything. Junior brother Ren, please make way. Let's part here." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Oh, I was ordered by the sect leader to go to the ruins of Huanshu. I don't know which path to take here. Senior brother, please guide me." Ruins of Huanshu? The disciples looked at each other in surprise. The disciple in front muttered to himself and pointed with his finger, "Junior brother Ren is wrong to go to the ruins of Huanshu. He has to take this path." After listening to the disciple's explanation, Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. It turned out that he had already taken the wrong path. Chapter 890. In the middle of a mountain covered by green trees, there was a huge peach tree beside a small lake. At this moment, thousands of pink peach blossoms were blooming on the peach tree. Under the peach tree, a middle-aged man in white was holding a long sword and waving it slowly. His sword moves were so slow that it was like an old man training in the morning. His footsteps were also ordinary. His footsteps were not light nor heavy, just like an ordinary person walking. However, every time the long sword danced, there would be an undercurrent in the air that would follow the long sword's movements. Although many of the fallen petals under the peach trees did not follow the movements of the person's footsteps, they were eager to give it a try as the long sword stretched and retracted. Not long later, the middle-aged man's sword moves were so slow that it was as heavy as 10,000 caddies. The surrounding fallen petals gradually jumped and were unwilling to turn into spring mud. They danced in the air following the changes of the long sword. This was still not considered shocking. After a long time, even more peach blossoms flew down from the peach tree and joined the dance. Moreover, there were more and more of them, and in a moment, the hundreds of peach blossoms condensed into the shape of a person and rapidly danced in the air. Suddenly, the middle-aged man shouted and pointed the long sword in his hand into the lake. The human-shaped peach blossoms flew into the lake. Before the peach blossoms could get close, a loud sound came from the lake. A huge wave of several feet high was created by the long sword and the peach blossoms were directly smashed into the lake. When the lake was covered by the falling petals, the middle-aged man slowly withdrew his long sword and smiled as he muttered to himself, "The sword light is restrained and returned to its original state." As the saying goes, the shapeless sword chi can harm people without them noticing. I have practiced for many years. I did not expect that I would succeed in this disheartened and lazy state. Sigh. The middle-aged man's forehead was full and the ground was round. He had a graceful appearance. Wasn't he the eldest disciple of Ruijin Palace, Shimujuan? The falling flowers are yearning for love, but the heartless flowing water is heartless. Looking at the countless peach blossoms floating in the lake, Shimujun could not help but feel sad. A trace of hatred appeared in his eyes as he shook his long sword. His figure rose from the ground and swiftly rushed down the mountain like a horse. As for the dozen or so disciples of the Ruijin Palace, when they saw Zhang Xiaohua heading towards a fork in the road, they also turned around and patted their horses to head in another direction. After a short time, one of the disciples looked back and saw that they were far away from the fork in the road and whispered, "Junior brother Yang, this Ren Xiaoyao, how can he be so bold?" First, he offended Fiery Palace's Zhang Pinger, infuriating Senior Marshal Brother Yu to the point that he wanted to go down the mountain and kill that bastard. Then, he hooked up with Senior Marshal Sister Zi Xia of Mo Xian Palace and drove Senior Marshal Brother Shi away. It's already been more than a month and there's still no trace of him. Junior Brother Yang smiled and said, "This is where he's smart, stepping on people one by one. However, we're stepping on our own Senior Marshal brothers, while he's stepping on our Senior Marshal sisters." Tisk tsk, I also want to step on them, but there's no Junior Marshal sister for me to step on. By the way, Junior Brother Yang, didn't Senior Marshal Brother Yu say that he wanted to go down the mountain to kill that bastard? Why did he disappear? Tell me, did Senior Marshal Brother Yu go or not? Aren't you talking nonsense? If Senior Marshal Brother Yu went, how could that bastard survive? How could there be a story of him charging into the remnant fragrance with a sword? Wouldn't Senior Marshal Sister Zi Xia and Senior Marshal Brother Shi be on the same level? However, Senior Marshal Brother Yu went out in a huff and then disappeared without a trace. Could it be what? A voice came from the side. The disciple was startled. When he looked up, he revealed an awkward smile and bowed, "Senior Marshal Brother Shi, you're back." I'm back. What did you just say? Say it again. This. The disciple hesitated. I said that Senior Marshal Brother Yu went out in a huff after talking to Junior Marshal Brother Yang and then disappeared without a trace. Maybe Ren Xiaoyao, did something evil to him. That might not be the case. The disciple gritted his teeth and finished his sentence. Third martial brother you hasn't returned yet? Shi Mujuan asked curiously. Then, he said, you're right. It makes a lot of sense. However, why didn't you say anything when I asked you earlier? The disciple said innocently, Senior martial brother Shi, this is just nonsense from me. Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts are far inferior to senior martial brother Yu's. How could he do something evil to senior martial brother Yu? That might not be the case. Ren Xiaoyao is extremely strong. If third martial brother Yu didn't notice. Shi Mujuan said with a smile without looking away. Yes, senior martial brother Shi is right. With Ren Xiaoyao's strength, even senior martial brother Hu would be defeated. It's hard to say if senior martial brother Yu was careless. The disciple smiled apologetically. Alright, remember this. When I look for you in the future, don't forget that there's still you. Yes, senior martial brother Shi. I understand. Junior martial brother Yang nodded. Alright, go ahead. Look for me when you're back. Shi Mujuan stood up and was about to leave. However, he thought of something and asked, why did you suddenly think of Ren Xiaoyao? The disciple pointed at the fork in the distance. Senior martial brother Shi, we bumped into Ren Xiaoyao at the fork in the road. From what he said, he actually received an order from Lord Hierarch to go to the ruins of purification. But he took a wrong turn and went that way. Shi Mujuan nodded. Yes, I understand. Lord Hierarch's orders must be important. That slow-witted fellow actually lost his way. Sigh, it's obvious that he's not a diligent person. Forget it. Since Lord Hierarch thinks highly of him, what does it have to do with us? You guys go ahead. I'm about to return to Rui Jin Hall. Oh right, is everything alright in the hall? It's nothing. Senior martial brother Shi, you should head back first. Lord Hierarch has been nagging about it for a long time. Alright, I'll head back now. Go ahead. After Shi Mujuan finished speaking, he executed his movement technique and headed toward the fork in the road. When he reached the fork in the road, he opened his eyes and ears. When he saw that there was no one around, he bent down and headed in the direction of Zhang Xiaohua. Just as Shi Mujuan was heading toward Zhang Xiaohua's fork in the road, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Her left hand formed a seal, and it was the technique of the Hand of Karma from the Heavenly Tao. However, the technique was extremely profound. During the month when Zhang Xiaohua was recuperating on Lingering Fragrance Peak, she had been trying to comprehend it. However, she was still unable to comprehend it. She didn't even gain the slightest bit from it. She could only use her left hand to form the technique. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't surprised when she saw that the technique on her left hand was ineffective. The Tao of Karma was so profound that the technique derived from it was naturally of a high level. In Zhang Xiaohua's opinion, even the technique of the innate divine restriction couldn't be compared to it. How could she possibly comprehend it in just a month? However, Zhang Xiaohua also knew that although her Hand of Karma couldn't calculate the reason, since her heart was moved, something unfavorable must have happened to her. The most important thing was to take precautions first. Speaking of precautions, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously took out the small shield in her arms. Other than the jade piece, Zhang Xiaohua's defense was also the robe left behind by Elder Hua. Speaking of the robe, Zhang Xiaohua was also depressed. It wasn't right to say that the robe was useless. During this expedition, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use the Immortal Tao technique. Along the way, she was attacked by the disciples of Rui Jin Palace. She didn't know how many long swords had pierced her body. If it weren't for the robe, she would have been injured long ago. However, this robe was still on her body and she didn't know how to activate it. Along the way, although the sword tips were blocked, a lot of the force was transmitted to her body. Zhang Xiaohua's serious injuries were mostly due to this robe. Presumably, this kind of defensive celestial tool could only resist the attack of genuine qi. It was useless against pure force attacks. Of course, the most important thing was that this robe was close-fitting. If the defense was ineffective, it would directly hit Zhang Xiaohua's body. She would be the one suffering the pain. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua still hoped to refine this small shield so that she could use it in the future. In front of Mo Xian Palace, Zhang Xiaohua had witnessed Nun Jingyi's powerful divine sense. Although he didn't know what level of qi refining or foundation establishment Nun Jingyi was, just her divine sense alone was more powerful than Zhang Xiaohua's. How would he dare to show any signs of being an immortal Dao practitioner in Mo Xian Palace? Only after leaving Lingering Fragrance Peak did he dare to have any ideas about this small shield. Huan Huan's legs were strong. By the time the sky turned dark, they had already traveled a long distance and arrived at a mountain forest. Zhang Xiaohua occasionally looked back with his divine sense and attention. He looked left and right, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. On the mountain path, they met a few outer disciples. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua's clothes, they knew that he was an inner disciple. They were all very respectful and didn't dare to be negligent. How could it be as unexpected as Zhang Xiaohua thought? After entering the mountain forest, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down from Huan Huan's back. He patted Huan Huan's protruding horn and took the great wisdom sword with him. When he came out, he was in a valley. Looking around, Zhang Xiaohua didn't find a good place to hide. He sat down cross-legged and released his divine sense. He threw the small shield in his hand and it floated in the air. The restriction in the small shield was still there. As long as his divine sense tried to force its way in, it would immediately be ejected. He closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Zhang Xiaohua formed a spell with his hands and used a few common sacrificial spells from the Refining the World to see if it would be useful. Unfortunately, when the spells entered, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There wasn't any sound. The small shield was still floating in the air, and only a vague outline could be seen. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Just as he was about to put the small shield back into his money pouch, his heart suddenly stirred. Another extremely familiar hand seal appeared in his left and right hands. Once the true qi was absorbed, Zhang Xiaohua waved his right hand and hit the small shield. Suddenly, the small shield moved slightly and even emitted an extremely faint fiery red brilliance. Eh? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He thought to himself, the sacrificial spell of the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace. How can it be used to refine this small shield? It turned out that the spell Zhang Xiaohua used was the sacrificial spell he learned from the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace. Could it be that this small shield was also refined by an expert of the incense cult, just like the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace? Zhang Xiaohua guessed. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.